Good evening, everyone. It's now 6:30 p.m. and I'll declare this meeting of the Town of Victoria Park Council is open. I'm going to invite Councillor Mel Rosa to read the Acknowledgement of Country.
Nyan Jerapin Wajak Nunga Bujak Yakan Nijibil Yabado. I am honoured to be standing on Wajak Nunga country on the banks of the Swan River. Nyan Kadich Nunga Mo Kanakadak Nija Wajak Nunga Bujak. Nyan Kadich Nija Nunga Burdia Korea Yeye Borda Balapin Mudich Nunga Kadajan Mort Where Buja Yeye. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and respect past, present and emerging leaders, their continual cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, which continues to be important today. Nyan Yanka Balapin Nunga Burdia Where Mort Nija Buja. I thank them for the contribution made to life in the town of Victoria Park and to this region.
Thanks, Councillor Mel Rosa. Item 2 on the agenda is announcements from the presiding member. 2.1 is recording and live streaming of proceedings, and in accordance with Regulation 14I of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, this meeting is being audio and video recorded and live streamed on the town's website. Under Clause 39(1) of the Town of Victoria Park's Meeting Procedures Local Law 2019, I do not give permission for any other person to record the proceedings of this meeting. By being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the possibility that their image and voice may be live streamed to the public. Recordings are also made available on the town's website following the meeting. 2.2 is public question time and public statement time. There are guidelines that need to be adhered to in our council meetings, and during question and statement time, people speaking are not to personalise any questions or statements about elected members or staff or use any possible defamatory remarks. In accordance with Clause 40 of the Meeting Procedures Local Law, a person addressing the council shall extend due courtesy and respect to the council and the processes under which it operates, and shall comply with any direction by the presiding member. A person present at or observing a meeting shall not create a disturbance at a meeting by interrupting or interfering with the proceedings, whether by expressing approval or dissent, by conversing or by any other means. When the presiding member speaks during public question time or public statement time, any person then speaking is to immediately stop, and every person present is to preserve strict silence so that the presiding member may be heard without interruption. As per my usual practice, there's a limit of 3 questions per person and 2 minutes are allocated for statements, 1 statement per person. However, if there are very few people in the public gallery, we can be more generous with those limitations. No adverse reflection in accordance with Clause 56 of the Meeting Procedures Local Law, both elected members and the public, when speaking, are not to reflect adversely on the character or actions of elected members or employees. In terms of the Mayor's report from February to today, that will be published in the minutes of the meeting. Attendance, we have currently all elected members in attendance save for Deputy Mayor Miles, who I understand is coming in late. We do have an apology from Councillor Minson, and Councillor Anderson is on approved leave of absence. We have a number of members of the town's executive and management staff who are led by the CEO, Mr Askew. Item 4 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Mr CEO, do we have any declarations of interest, please?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Yes, I do. Item 12.1, Councillor Crozer, an impartiality interest. I have discussed this item with members of the community. Item 13.1, also Councillor Crozer, impartiality. 2 of the applicants are known to me. Item 13.1, yourself, Mayor Vernon, an impartiality. I know the owner of applicant 1 and have had discussions with them about when 10 Kent Street would be advertised for lease. And item 14.3, yourself, Mayor Vernon, impartiality. An increased budget is sought for the synthetic bowling green. I am a patron of the bowling club and have had discussions with the club for their desire for a synthetic green on numerous occasions.
Thank you. Do we have any other declarations of interest that elected members haven't made, which they need to make? Deputy Mayor Miles.
13.1, impartiality interest. 2 of the applicants are known to me.
All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor, if you'll send the written one of that declaration through later, that would be helpful. Thank you. Any other elected members who have an interest that they need to declare but haven't already done so? No, not seeing any indication, but as always, a gentle reminder that if you do consider after this point in the meeting that you do have an interest that needs to be declared, please do so before debate commences on the item. Item 5 on the agenda is public question time, which I now open at 6:36 p.m. I do have some indications for some members of the public who would like to ask questions, so I'm going to go with the people on that list first, and then we will move from there to open it up to wider to the public gallery. So first on the list, Vince Maxwell, please come forward. Could you just please state your name and suburb for us? Thank you.
Good evening again. Vince Maxwell, Victoria Park. Almost 2 years ago, the town told the auditor that it would mitigate the serious risk of issuing purchase orders after invoices were received by, and I quote, reporting all non-compliant purchase orders to the CFO as part of the purchasing team's month-end process. After many unanswered letters, emails and questions at council meetings, the CFO has now made the astonishing admission in the agenda tonight that the town is not capable of providing the CFO with this report. Obviously, you, Mayor, and the Council are now aware of the CFO's answer to me, which is printed in the agenda. When was Council first made aware that the town was not implementing the risk management controls using the method that they had committed to in the to the auditor in 2024?
Refer that to the CFO, Mr. CFO.
So the comment attached in that audit letter was an assessment at the time about a possible remedy. When in the correspondence with the auditors, there are possible solutions thrown up. As my answer indicated, the specific report that they are recommending, our system can't do it. So we have put in a different control. So obviously we can produce purchase orders, and we, as a wider sample, whether they're pre or post invoice, just to ensure as much as we can compliance with the purchasing policy. From recollection, I have answered this at audit and risk in some way across a number of times, but I couldn't give you day and time because they're quite frequent, those meetings. So we just adapt as we come across information as best as we can.
Anything further, Mr. Maxwell?
I thought you were looking as puzzled as I was.
I was trying to work out, you talked about the answer being in the agenda, and I'm looking to try and find it. Can you point me to where it is?
It's in 5.1, I think it is. I don't have the full agenda here, but it's...
Won't be in 5.1, I wouldn't have thought, because I'm looking at responses to previous public questions taken on notice.
Yes, it was what it was.
Trying to find it.
It was taken on notice at the last OCM, and the answer was provided in this agenda.
Oh, that's okay. I found it now. Sorry, my mistake. I'm looking at this. I'm sorry I have multifocals. Sometimes when I look down at the screen, it's a little bit blurry in the bottom area, but okay, so I see the question and I see your answer. So do you have another question?
I was wondering when the council was first made aware of this, but it sounds like we don't know. Well,
Mr. Maxwell, the CFO's answer, and I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't perhaps agree with your question that there was a commitment to a particular course of action would be carried out. What I understand him to have said in answer to your particular question is that there was a recommendation for a course of action and there were particular options available, and because some part of it was not able to be done through the town's existing, I assume it's computer system, some other route was taken. Is that about right, Mr. Old? Have I got that right?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that is correct. So we have a ERP, so a core financial system, and there's some things that can do and some recommendations that the auditors may make, which in theory might be good, but if the system can't do it, it just can't necessarily do it. So there's other financial processes that we adapt as new technology comes along, new risks come along. AI is front of mind, so we have to adapt and change to that, probably quite a regular basis.
So I think on that basis, Mr. Maxwell, the underlying proposition in your question was that there was a firm commitment, and that commitment you consider has not been followed through, and you want to know when council was told that the firm commitment would not be followed through. The answer I hear from the CFO is that there wasn't a firm commitment. There was a recommendation for a potential course of action that couldn't be followed in the way it was suggested, and another course of action took its place. So that's about as best I understand the answer that was given. So do you have another question?
I just wanted to confirm that is it true that the town does not have the capability of providing a report on a monthly basis on the purchase orders, which would be around, I'd estimate, around 80 a month, that were issued after an invoice has been received? So the town doesn't have that capacity to be able to provide a report like that to the CFO each month. Is that basically the...
I'll ask the CFO. Mr. CFO?
Correct. So when the attempted report was presented to me, upon analysis, it was just not accurate information. So I must point out we issue probably 20,000 in POs a year, possibly even more. So we have taken a wider sample to ensure that POs that are issued prior to an invoice themselves do have the required quotes or tender or other information that that the procurement policy requires of us.
That's a different understanding to what I read into it. Is it saying that the sampling is done on all purchase orders, not just the ones that are issued after an invoice is received?
Mr. CFO?
Correct.
Wow, okay. I've got some questions on the Elizabeth Baillie report, unless you want someone else to have a go first.
I do have another person who is listed down who's got some questions, and there is another member in the public gallery who may or may not be here to ask questions. I haven't ascertained, but how many questions do you have, Mr. Maxwell?
Three or four, a couple of little ones in there. I can let someone else have a crack
We'll
first.
try for the 3 or 4. If it gets to the stage where it's 4 and we're entering into multi-part questions, then I might, in fairness, ask the other members of the public gallery if they'd like to come forward first. Thanks.
So in the Elizabeth Baillie report, it shows that early in the contract, the contractor formally submitted a request for information to the town for clarification of the scope and approval of what tree removal, clearing works and underpruning of trees can be undertaken. How many of the 94 trees were removed by the contractor without authorisation from the town officer?
Direct that question to the Chief Operations Officer, Ms. Lubicus.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. So through the very nature, the initiation of a RFI, request for information process, actually elicits response from a town officer. So I guess what the investigation saw, that there was exchange of emails or requests for information through the superintendent that identified trees to be removed.
But you don't have a quantity of how many they removed without getting permission?
So there was a level of permission given. What the report questioned was the mechanism that was used to approve those trees.
So call that 0, shall I? Or?
Well, let's perhaps not engage in that exercise, Mr. Maxwell. It's going to have to be specific questions and little follow-up ones that try to suggest what the answer is that the Chief Operations Officer has given you. It's not going to be helpful because it's not going to be a true answer to your question. You would presumably be familiar with having read attachment 13.4.2 that lists the trees that have been identified. This has been put together as a result of a request that I made of the town staff after the ABF. I wanted to see a compilation that identified the tree identification numbers and every piece of information we could possibly have that identified those trees, where they were, when they were removed, why they were removed, details about them. And now we have a table that, as best the town has answered my request, is now attached to this agenda item. And it does show that, for example, there are some trees that were removed and there wasn't a document called a tree removal form, which is the very last column of the table. But as I read the table, there would be some trees that were removed that didn't require a tree removal form because they were removed pursuant to the development application conditions. So in other words, the investigation report provided by the town makes clear that there were the two different sites, the site controlled by Black Oak, the site controlled by the town. It appears that one more tree, as I read it, was removed from the Black Oak site than the original plan, and that one more tree came about as a result of a further request made to the town to revise the development application conditions, and that request was approved by the town's officers under their delegated authorities for planning matters, which saw 17 trees instead of the original 16 as per the development application approval. But then when it came to the town's trees, there are some trees that appear to have been removed, and they don't appear to have removal forms, but they appear to have some explanation for how it is they came out. So I guess at the end of the day, we've got the information that the town has been able to provide and make available to us. So asking for a flat number, how many were approved without authorisation? My interpretation of the report is that all of these trees came out with some level of authorisation, but the report makes clear that some of those processes were not the processes that were expected or should have been followed, that would have led to the trees coming out.
Thank you for that.
But that's only my understanding of the report. I've tried to get into it. It's a difficult read.
I agree. It is difficult. I've read that table that you said you asked for and compared it with the information we have, but it is difficult to ascertain whether it looks to me like most of the trees removal were approved in some form by the town, but there is a lot of talk out in the community that blaming the contractor for it and saying the contractor should be hauled over the coals. But my interpretation of it is the town authorised all those removals. I'll just ask one more question.
I will say, Mr. Maxwell, that is my understanding of the report, and whilst I'm aware that there is talk within the community, particularly circulating on social media about the contractor should be responsible, it doesn't take very long for these rumours to grow, and they often don't grow based on any understanding of the background matters, but it does appear that the trees that were removed via some process, but the report makes clear that's not the process we expected them to be removed by. And in part, that is the very reason for coming out very early with a statement that said whether the contractor removed these trees without our knowledge or whether they were removed with our knowledge, the buck stops with the town. We're ultimately responsible for what happened on the site. We'll make no apology and no excuses for that. So,
Thank you.
Do you have another question?
I'll just have one more. I'm just wondering, you're referring to that table 1342. I'm just wondering if it would surprise you to learn that the Freedom of Information documents that we have reveal that there are signed authorities for the removal of 2 additional trees that are not shown on that table that you were given, and that means that the total of the trees removed is actually 96.
Well, clearly, you're telling it to me now, Mr. Maxwell. I'm not privy to what you got under an FOI because, as you would be aware, the town staff don't provide copies of every FOI application that they receive, nor the documents that they provide in answer to an FOI to all of us council members, because FOI processes are operational processes where members of the public can request the town's documentation under the relevant FOI legislation. And that's not a matter that elected members have that shared with them any more than we get shared with us what orders are put in for pens and, staplers and things like that. So if you're telling me that you've identified tree removal forms that relate to this particular park and they're not on this compilation table, then I encourage you to make copies of those available to either the town and or elected members so we can see them. But noting that from the beginning, we were always aware that trees were going to be removed off the site. That's something that you know intimately well because you've had an interest in this project from the beginning. But there certainly were trees that were removed that were in excess of what was originally understood to be removed. And now we have greater clarity to a degree over how that process played out. So if there's 2 more trees that you think are not been included, please share the details with us. We'll be happy to look at that.
I can do, but just let you know, I've only got information that the town has, and I've only got some of it because the CEO won't give it all to us. So he's got all of it, so he should be able to see this information as well.
All right. Well, as I say, I do encourage you to let us know the details, at least of the tree ID numbers that you have, and you can do that in any number of ways. I leave that to you.
So you want me to cooperate with the town? It's one-way street.
Well,
okay. I will do. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Maxwell, trying to get you some answers to your questions, so it's up to you how you choose to take that, but thank you. Next on the list, Peter Devereux. Please come forward, state your name and your suburb.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Twice in 2 days. Peter Devereux, Star Street, Carlisle again. Will I go straight to the questions? Thanks. So my questions are in relation to item 13.2, the METRONET agreements. My first question is the Urbis 2024 report on the Oak Street precinct plan predicted 107 to 821 potential new dwellings over 10 years in the precinct. Do you think the increased rates income from these dwellings would potentially cover the predicted maintenance for Long Park in the long term?
Well, the Chief Community Planner is nodding in the direction of the Chief Financial Officer, so Mr. Old, looks like it's you. I don't know if Mr. Old knows the predicted numbers.
If I can, Mayor, can you just repeat the question again?
Sure, no problem. So the Urbis 2024 report, so that's a report that was done for the town by Urbis as part of the precinct development plan in the lead up to May of 2024. On the precinct plan, predicted 107 to 821 potential new dwellings from the precinct plan over 10 years. The question was, do you think the increased rates income from these dwellings could cover the predicted maintenance for Long Park in the long term?
I think you're asking the Chief. I think you're asking for. There's a lot of speculation in there, because if it's 107 up to 821 new dwellings, then there's an awful lot of ifs as to whether we'll make 107, let alone 821, and what kind of rate base they might be based off. I should imagine there's a bunch of permutations that might be speculative. Are you looking for something that says what the likely rates income would be at the 107 and what it might be when it reaches 821, assuming it does?
That seems a fair question to ask,
Right.
given that's what's in the Urbis report.
So, Mr. CFO, is there a way to do that kind of calculation, or would that be something you'd have to take on notice and get back to us?
I'll
as
have to
well?
take
It could
that
be
on
done.
notice. Sorry, Mayor, I didn't mean to interrupt. So, yeah, we'll have to take that on notice and we'll perhaps look at that report and just do some estimates.
So look, we'll take it on notice, but I think, for a start, it'd have to be determined whether we're going to use like a minimum rates payment to do the calculation, because obviously many of the new dwellings in that area will be rated differently to each other, because some of them might be, you know, like a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, others might be a 3 or 4-bedroom house. And so the rate space is going to be completely different based on the value of the property. So I think the only way it could be done would be to try and take an average of what the rates could be and work it out from there. So, but we'll take it on notice and see what we can come up with. Do you have another question?
I obviously wasn't expecting a precise figure. It was just to get an idea, given there was a figure mentioned for maintenance for Long Park. The second question was, given that the Carlisle Place Plan identified a lack of quality public open space in Carlisle, particularly near the Oat Street station, to what extent has Long Park reduced this deficit?
Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon, and I can't look at the CFO for this one. Yes, the Carlisle Place Plan does identify a deficit at the time of the place that the place plan was created for Carlisle, as does our public open space strategy. The Long Park goes a significant way to reducing, if not eliminating, that gap that was identified specifically in the public open space strategy. In terms of how much it reduces or if it fully eliminates that gap, I would have to take that on notice. Yep.
Take that on notice.
Thank you. Last one. Which other local governments that are part of the METRONET elevated rail developments have already signed or plan to sign agreements for their METRONET assets?
Refer that question to the Chief Operations Officer, Ms. Libicus.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I can confirm that both Armidale and City of Canning have already signed. I'm not so clear on Byford or Gosnells, but I can certainly follow that up. Take that one on notice.
So 2 have signed. Thank you. Yep. Great. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. There being no other questions from the public gallery, I'll close public question time at 6:58 p.m. Item 6 on the agenda is public statement time, which I now open at 6:58 p.m. Have 2 people listed to make statements. So, Mr. Maxwell, invite you up to make your statement first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The documents that the Ratepayers Association have for 53 of the trees removed includes the asset numbers, species, height, width, age, health and structural condition of each tree. It also identifies the town officer who authorised the removal, the date it was authorised and the stated reason for removal. The CEO is refusing to release the documents for the rest of the 94 trees, or actually 96 now. These authorisation documents matter because they are what allowed the contractor to proceed. On the basis of those instructions, the contractor could and most likely did invoice the town for removing the trees the town itself directed them to remove. The report before you now tells us that the outcome was caused by poor management systems, lack of coordination and lack of leadership within the organisation. In other words, the town admits the system failed. And who pays for the failure? The ratepayers. They paid to remove the trees and they will now pay again to replace them. Council specifically requested that this report explain when the trees were removed, why they were removed and who removed them. That information already exists in the town's own delegation of authority documents. But instead of presenting that detail, the town is effectively asking you to look at the summary, not the evidence, and simply accept that this was a breakdown where nobody appears to be responsible. That is not accountability. The Mayor made several public statements expressing council horror at what occurred and promised the community that the council would get to the bottom of it. Yet tonight you are being asked to accept a report that concludes that the town was in disarray, that nobody knew what anyone else was doing, the management structures failed, but somehow no one is accountable. The community deserves better. And with respect, buying a new project management software system will not fix this problem. That would be like handing a child a spanner and asking them to repair an aeroplane. Software doesn't fix leadership failures. What this organisation needs is proper accountability and leadership from the top down. Councillors, as the community's representatives, you should insist on a proper report with proper findings and real outcomes for the community. Okay.
Thanks, Mr Maxwell. Peter Devereux.
Before I start my statement as well, I just want to say what a great night it was last night. The annual meeting of electors, one of the best ones I've ever been to, I think. Very refreshing. Item 13.2 on the METRONET agreements, I believe, is a great opportunity to build on the positive collaboration this Council has had with the state government by finalising the maintenance agreements for quality local-led maintenance of Long Park. Other local governments, as we just heard, 2 of them have already signed their agreements. Signing the agreement also unlocks the funds for the community request for a toilet block additional to the train station ones and helps cement the survival and growth of the new trees and vegetation that are a vital part of our urban forest strategy. Long Park makes the previously underutilised space on the rail line a vibrant space for activation. It will enhance and foster the planned Oak Street precinct mixed-use development that will bring more people and rates income to the town for our long-term future. The Urbis report to the Council identified 107 to 821 potential new dwellings over 10 years. Carlisle's Place Plan, as we've discussed, identified the need for more public open space, and Long Park has delivered it, including a $14 million capital investment in infrastructure that the town didn't have to provide or build to achieve this, thanks to the collaboration with the state government. Long Park signifies the end of the barbed wire fence barrier between north and south of Vic Park, which improves the permeability of the town and encourages a connection to public transport and better flow across the town, particularly by active transport. Long Park is now a feature of the town that demonstrates its active and vibrant community and integrated transport credentials. In short, I believe signing up to the METRONET agreements is not signing up to an economic millstone, but instead unlocking the long-term potential for vibrant development along the rail corridor. It will enhance the town's social, environmental and economic viability for the future by making the Oak Street precinct plan and any additional density that the state government suggests a contributor to a strong and sustainable Vic Park. It also helps highlight the value the town places on the long collaboration the town has had with the state government for the delivery of this successful project. I believe that's well documented in the officer's report, and it's good governance to follow through on this work started many years ago in good faith. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your statement. Is there any other statement from another member of the public who hasn't made a statement? No, there being no one else, I will close public statement time at 7:03 p.m. All right, just going to double check. Deputy Mayor Miles, I understand you're having some trouble connecting. Are you connected? Because we're going to start electronic voting, and I just need to know if you're online or we need to make some other arrangements for you.
So I'm on the guest access, so as long as it doesn't boot me out after an hour, then I got permission from governance. I had to fill in a form. I got permission, but I just don't know if it's gonna. Does it last would it last for the whole day once you get access? We don't know.
I don't. It sounds like we don't know the answer to that question. Maybe we've never had to encounter that one before, but we'll see how we go. But please let me know at any stage if you're not able to get access, and then we can make other arrangements for the recording of your votes and the like. All right. Okay. So. Item 7 is confirmation of minutes and receipt of notes from any agenda briefing forum. So the recommendation is that Council 1 confirms the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on 17 February 2026 and 2 receives the notes of the agenda briefing forum held on 3 March 2026, and I am now seeking a mover and a seconder, please, for that recommendation. All right, so I'm told that is moved by Councillor Cruiser and seconded by Councillor Biondi. I'm going to ask formally, is there any... Oh, that's telling me that Councillor Gordon Manley is a tick. Well, it doesn't say moved or seconded, so I'm not sure if we can remove that. Somehow we're taking it off now. Thank you. So I'm going to formally ask, is there any dissent? No, there being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 8, presentation of minutes from external bodies. The recommendation is that Council 1 receives the minutes of the WA Local Government Association South East Metropolitan Zone meeting held on 19 November 2025. 2 receives the minutes of the Catalina Regional Council meeting held on 11 December 2025. And 3 receives the minutes of the Mindarie Regional Council meeting held on 18 December 2025. So can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? All right, that is moved Councillor Ingram, seconded by myself, Mayor Vernon. Is there any dissent? No, there being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. Item 9 is presentations. 9.1 petitions, there are none. 9.2 presentations, there are none. 9.3 deputations, we have none. Item 10, method of dealing with agenda business. I'll read through the item numbers that are proposed to be dealt with by exception resolution. If there's an item in there that elected members would wish to have removed from the list, please let me know and we will take it out. So that will include anything that you plan to vote against or you want to ask questions on. So the recommendation is that the following items be adopted by exception resolution and the remaining items be dealt with separately. 11.1 Council Resolution Status Report February 2026, 13.3 Strategic Waste Management Plan Progress Update, 13.5 Tender TVP 2519 Tree Planting and Watering, 14.1 Financial Statements January 2026, 14.2 Statement of Accounts January 2026, 15.1 Audit Update Report February 2026 and 15.2 Corporate Business Plan Quarter 2 Progress Report October to December 2025. Assuming that no one is seeking to have any of those items removed, I'll be seeking a mover and a seconder, please. That is moved Councillor Crozer, seconded Councillor Biondi. Thank you. Is there any dissent? No, there being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. So we'll now go to item 11 on the reports, which is the Chief Executive Officer reports. Item 11.1 has been dealt with by exception resolution. That brings us to 11.2, which is the Code of Conduct for Council members. This is an absolute majority item. The recommendation is that Council endorses the changes to the Town of Victoria Park Code of Conduct for Council members, committee members and candidates as contained in Attachment 1. So I'm seeking a mover and a seconder for that item, please. Moved by myself, Mayor Vernon, seconded Councillor Cruiser. I don't wish to be heard. Councillor Cruiser, do you wish to be heard on this item? No. Or formally ask, is there any dissent? No, there being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Takes us to item 12, which is the Chief Community Planner reports. So item 12.1 is endorse for public advertising the draft Economic Development Strategy 2026 to 2030. The recommendation is that Council endorses the advertising of the Draft Economic Development Strategy 2026 to 2030 as per Attachment 1 for a 21-day public comment period. Can I seek a mover and a seconder, please, for the officer's recommendation? All right, that's moved Councillor Cruiser and seconded myself, Mayor Vernon. Councillor Cruiser, I'm going to come to you with regards to speaking to the item. All right, thank you. I don't wish to be heard on the matter. Councillor Cruiser, I understand you want to put forward an amendment, is that right? Do you want to do that now?
So my amendment is that Council endorses the advertising of the Draft Economic Development Strategy 2026 to 2030 per Attachment 1 for a 21-day public comment period subject to A. Modifying the Draft Economic Development Strategy timeline to 2026 to 2029 and B. Including information and questions related to community wealth building principles in the public consultation. And my reason is that many members of the community have voiced an interest in ensuring that the town's economic development approach prioritises local needs, including for an inclusive, diverse and resilient local economy. Explicitly including information about community wealth building principles in the public consultation process will allow the community to give informed feedback on what that might look like. Planning for a major review of the economic development strategy in 2029 will allow for more work to incorporate these principles should the community be supportive.
Thanks, Councillor Cruiser. Can I seek a seconder, please, for the amendment? So that has been seconded by Councillor Gordon Manley. Councillor Cruiser, did you want to speak further to your proposed amendment?
Thank you. Yes, I've been invited to a number of interesting events lately by members of the community who are really interested in how we build a more vibrant local community, and particularly about how we think about how our community survives through times of economic crisis, supply chain disruptions, and other issues. We saw that in many areas during the height of the COVID pandemic, a lot of local businesses in some areas went out of business. People who ran small businesses that were particularly vulnerable to these shocks really suffered. And so trying to think about community wealth building is one way to consider how we can create more resilience in our local community, allow more money that is spent in our local community to stay within the community, and also about how we think about providing support to people involved in small businesses and non-profit organisations and also not-for-profit organisations that really help to make our community stronger. This is obviously not a complete shift to that approach. This is just starting to gauge the community's interest in including some of those principles when we do develop the economic strategy, even if we were to incorporate some of those principles into a slight tweak of the economic development strategy, thinking about doing a deeper consideration of the strategy around 2028 to come in around 2029 will allow us the time to really get a good run-up to think through which of these principles, if any, might be relevant to our community and to consider how we might implement them.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon Manley, did you wish to be heard on this amendment? No? All right, I'm going to ask if there's any dissent to the amendment so we can determine if we need debate. Is there any dissent to the proposed amendment? Councillor Ingram. Like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in regards to this, I will note that the draft economic development strategy 2026 to 2030 is a staff-built document that's come off the back of significant consultation with the business community. And unfortunately, the feedback that has been gained from that process has not included, to best of my knowledge, community wealth building principles incorporated within it. So we're basically asking to take a public, open sourced critique of that strategy and all that work, but now attach a second barnacled set of ideas to it to gauge public sentiment. Whereas you would think that would be something that could organically happen through the process as it currently is listed for under the officer's recommendation. Secondly, modifying the draft economic development strategy timeline. Unfortunately, whilst I have no necessary qualms with a timeline restructuring down the track, I don't actually know if it's correct to look to do that at the stage of putting it out for public endorsement. Perhaps that's something council should be looking to consider later on once the feedback from the community is received and we actually are presented with a finalised strategy to be endorsed by council. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone now who wishes to speak in favour of the proposed amendment? Deputy Mayor Miles.
I'm in support of this amendment. I was part of the business advisory group when this came to the business advisory group. I think at the time there was probably 6 to 8 members, and we discussed it very broadly. I don't think it's unreasonable that, I guess, noting Councillor Ingram said it's going for public endorsement. It's not. It's going for sort of consultation. I don't think it's unreasonable to sort of suggest that we look at some ideas and potentially the community will like it, not like it, I guess we don't know. But just because it's gone to 8 people in a committee in one meeting, I don't think that necessarily means that we can't include other things. I think this seems reasonable. I think Vic Park especially has a lot of small business and independent businesses, and it's probably more relevant than perhaps it would be in some other areas. But also the community might not be interested, and it seems like a good opportunity to actually just reach out and see if they are. And so, yeah, I will be supporting this amendment.
Thank you. Do we now have a speaker against the proposed amendment? Councillor Ingram, you've spoken against. Did you have a question?
May I be allowed to clarify something that I referred to in my remark?
Is it of the nature of a personal explanation? Because the rule against speaking twice operates under clause 50 and 58 of the meeting procedures local law. And my understanding is that that's not a rule that otherwise allows for a clarification of something that you said. So you can ask a question, that's certainly allowable, but
Or perhaps it might be
a member is
classified as...
not to address the council more than once on any motion or amendment except if they're the mover of the substantive motion in exercising their right of reply, to raise a point of order, or C, to make a personal explanation.
My understanding is it may be a personal explanation as I'm explaining my prior remarks. So the survey I was referring to is the business perception survey.
Well, sorry, Councillor Ingram, before you go any further, I do need to rule on whether you're allowed to speak further on the matter. So I have asked you if it's to make a personal explanation, but I'm going to read out clause 54, personal explanations. A member who wishes to make a personal explanation relating to a matter referred to by another member who is then speaking is to indicate to the presiding member their intention to make a personal explanation. The presiding member is to determine whether the personal explanation is to be heard immediately or at the conclusion of the speech by the other member, noting that the other member has finished speaking already. And then 3, a member making a personal explanation is to confine their observations to a succinct statement relating to a specific part of the speech from the other member at which they may have been misunderstood. So is that what you're intending to do? So this is not to open up further reasons for your opposition to the amendment. It's only to provide a personal explanation for something that may have been said by Deputy Mayor Miles in speaking where you believe you may have been misunderstood. Just want to be clear about that. All right. On that basis, I'm going to allow you to make a personal explanation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The explanation I wanted to make was in regards to my statements that were talking about the way in which the consultation, as I'm aware, has progressed. So I was referring to the attached document of the Business Perception Survey for the town of Victoria Park. So that is 12.1.3. I was not referring simply to the business advisory group of some 8 odd members. I was talking to the 79-page length report and how I find the additional inclusion of this at this stage may subvert the comparison that we're obviously hoping to achieve under the public submission. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'll now resume the normal meeting procedures. And so I'll ask, is there anyone else who wishes to speak in dissent of the proposed amendment? If there's not, I'll ask, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the proposed amendment? Councillor Gordon-Manley, I did ask you if you wished to speak as a seconder and you declined to do so. You said no, you didn't wish to speak on the item. So you've made your election not to speak. So have you got a question that you want to ask now? Or are you planning to try and speak now? Look, I'm going to allow you to do so, but the rules are if you decline to speak as the seconder, there's no further right for you to speak. So that's something for you to remember in future debates. So we'll hear from you now.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep it short. In regards to the 21-day public comment period, I think we'll get pretty direct response from the public on whether or not they are interested in pursuing the community wealth building principles. So whether we proceed with that can be reviewed at that time. That's the only thing I wanted to highlight.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on the proposed amendment? If not, I'm going to come back to you, Councillor Cruiser, as the mover for you to close the debate.
Thank you. I do want to acknowledge that it is wonderful that this was developed with reference to the Business Perception Survey, which I read in great detail and found very interesting. I know that the consultation process will be open to businesses as well as other members of the community, but also that it is important that our local economy is meant to serve everyone in the community, and obviously it's really important to get information from businesses of all kinds from within the community, but we also need to know what the people who are working in those businesses, the people who visit those businesses, want from their local economy. And all of that has to be considered when it comes to finalising our economic development strategy. I also think that it's important to remember that businesses can take part in this consultation period, that obviously they will not be excluded in any way. So if they want to speak up at that point and say that some of these principles don't feel relevant or useful to them, they will have that opportunity, the people working at and who own these businesses. And with regards to the timeline, I think that whether or not we bring in some of these community wealth building principles into the final version, we are going through a time of some economic upheaval, which I hear particularly from anybody who has had to fuel up their car recently. There are some shocks ahead and some instability ahead. Taking the time to do a significant revision of our economic development strategy in 2029 seems very reasonable, so we can consider whether broader changes need to be made, either with regard to these principles or with regard to others. So I urge you to please vote for the amendment. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Councillor Cruiser. So if everyone can now please cast your votes on the amendment. Thank you. Sorry, I'm having some technical issues. It doesn't appear the system is recording my vote, so I cast my vote in favour of the amendment. Thank you, if that could be recorded. Do we have all other votes? Yep. So declare that the amendment is carried. Those in favour, myself, Mayor Vernon, Deputy Mayor Miles, Councillor Biondi, Councillor Melrosa, Councillor Gordon Manley and Councillor Cruiser. Those against, Councillor Ingram. So we now go back to the item as amended, and I'm going to formally ask, is there any dissent to the item as amended? No, there being no... Oh, sorry, Councillor Ingram, you're in dissent? All right, that's fine. The mover and the seconder has declined to speak. The mover has reserved their position. So, Councillor Ingram, over to you for dissent.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a matter for regarding the dissent against the now amended motion, I would wish to raise a point of order regarding the relevance of the amendments that have been added to this motion, because the initial request was that the council would endorse the advertising of the draft economic development strategy per the attachment for the 21-day public comment period. However, throughout the course of the discourse that took place on the amendment, it appears that other ideas of modifying, adjusting and changing that draft is now incorporated within the structure of this motion in its current form. So I'm just curious if that has not crossed over where the amendments have actually altered the nature of the original motion. Thank you.
So the problems I have, Councillor Ingram, is that a point of order in relation to the lawfulness of the amendment ought to have been made before the amendment was debated and voted upon. So the amendment was voted upon without any point of order raising its propriety, and so it's been passed. And so the rule is that once the amendment has been made, it's then incorporated into the motion. So the motion reads as amended. So whether there were 1 amendments to it or 5 amendments, the final consolidated version of the motion with the amendments is the motion we're now called upon to vote on. So you raising a point of order causes a problem for me at this stage. And equally, points of order are to be limited to breaches of the Act or the regulations or breaches of the meeting procedures, local law. So if you're pointing to a breach of the meeting procedures, local law, you'll need to identify for me which clause of the meeting procedures you say it is that has been breached. And then I will make an adjudication on both points.
Thank you for that clarification. I would be pointing to Order 77 and 78 regarding this particular proposed set of amendments.
All right, so you'll need to tell me in what respect you say, as a point of order, the amendment that was proposed breaches clause 77 and how it breaches clause 78.
So in regards to 78, each amendment is to be relevant to the motion in respect of which it is moved. The adjustment of a timeline which is not necessarily relevant to the public consideration of a strategy is something that I do not believe is relevant to the initial motion. And with regards to 77, the amendment must not negate the original motion. The original motion was to put the draft economic development strategy 2026-2030 out for the public comment period with the approval of council. It was not to incorporate additional values or theories to then button that on top of for public consideration. It wasn't a survey that was to be sent out simply for sourcing ideas. Thank you.
All right, thank you. My ruling is that your point of order is too late. It ought to have been raised when the amendment was put, before the amendment was voted on. If I am wrong in that, I then rule that your point of order is not upheld on the basis that the proposed amendment to the substantive motion doesn't negate the original motion or the intent of it, because that was to take the draft economic development strategy and put it out for advertising, and that intent is not altered by the amendment. And secondly, I would rule that your second basis for your proposed point of order in relation to clause 78 is also not upheld by me in relation to relevance of the amendments, because clause 78 says each amendment is to be relevant to the motion in respect of which it is moved, and I rule that the amendment about modifying the timeline for the economic development strategy's life is relevant to what we advertise, and including further information to be presented as part of the public consultation is relevant to the motion in respect of which it is moved. So that is my ruling. So we now go back to the substantive motion as amended, and I ask again, is there any dissent? Because if there is dissent, I'll hear those who are in dissent. Councillor Ingram, welcome to hear you in dissent.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm dissenting on this motion in the current structure that it is taken because of certain things being incorporated into the motion, which I believe will lay the opportunity for significant community confusion as to what they are and are not being asked to comment upon. There are other parts that will be potentially looked to be drawn on when regarding the community wealth building principles. And as was actually pointed out by Councillor Crozer, not all of those may be suitable for the economic mix that exists within the town of Victoria Park. And I have concerns that not going through a very robust synthesis or analysis stage and merely providing information to the public may mean that there is a significant disconnect on what can actually be achieved under that set of values and principles and what may be contrary to the way in which the town and its economic makeup currently operates. So it's for those reasons that I would like to oppose the motion as it stands, and I would encourage other councillors to oppose the motion as well.
Thank you, Councillor Ingram. Is there someone who wishes now to speak in favour of the substantive motion as amended? No? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak against? No? On that basis, Councillor Crozer, as the mover of the substantive motion, would you like to close the debate with the right of reply?
Thank you. I'll just briefly say that while I appreciate Councillor Ingram's concerns, this feedback has been developed with advice from staff about whether or not it is appropriate, and I trust our staff to work out the best way to put into practice point B of my amendment and to think about how to communicate that clearly and appropriately to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could now please have everyone to vote on the substantive motion as amended. Thank you. Since I continue to have technical issues, I cast my vote in favour of the substantive motion as amended. If that could be recorded, please. So declare that is carried. Those in favour, myself, Mayor Vernon, Deputy Mayor Miles, Councillor Biondi, Councillor Melrosa, Councillor Gordon Manley and Councillor Crozer. Thank you. Thanks everyone for the contributions to that item. Item 13 is the Chief Operations Officer reports, and item 13.1 is the 10 Kent Street, East Victoria Park evaluation of EOI submissions. So we have a recommendation that currently reads that Council 1 authorises the Chief Executive Officer to negotiate with applicant 1 for a lease for 10 Kent Street, East Victoria Park, consistent with key terms as outlined in attachment 2 and in accordance with policy 310 leasing and licensing. 2 authorises the Chief Executive Officer, should negotiations with applicant 1 not be finalised or the lease not commence within a reasonable timeframe, as determined by the Chief Executive Officer, to cease negotiations with applicant 1 and commence negotiations with applicant 2, and if necessary, applicant 3, in order of preference, substantially in accordance with their respective proposals as outlined in attachments 3 and 4, and in accordance with policy 310 leasing and licensing. And 3, authorises the CEO to execute as a deed all documents necessary to give effect to a lease arising from point 2 or 3 above, with final terms to be settled by the town's legal representatives and incorporating any variations or amendments to key terms as considered reasonable and necessary by the Chief Executive Officer. So, can I call please for a mover and a seconder for the officer's recommendation? Yeah, okay. Should be 1 or 2. Still seeking a seconder? All right, that is moved Councillor Crozer, seconded Councillor Gordon Manley. I just will note that the CEO has pointed out to me that there is an error in the officer recommendation in paragraph 3, where it refers to, in the second line, documents necessary to give effect to a lease arising from point 2 or 3 above. So it's actually in relation to point 1 or 2 above, as opposed to 2 or 3 above. So I think that's just a typographical error, so I'm happy for the Minutes Secretary to amend that. I'm assuming the mover and the seconder, Councillor Crozer and Councillor Gordon Manley, are not unhappy with that. So that is what you have moved as of now. So Councillor Crozer, as the mover, did you wish to be heard about this item? No, not at this stage. Councillor Gordon Manley, did you wish to be heard as the seconder? Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, I want to highlight these assets of ours that sit vacant. I think it's great to be utilising it, and I'd love to see us focus on utilising these assets for our community with haste.
Thank you. So I'm formally going to ask, is there any dissent to this item? All right, so there's no indication of dissent, but before I call that, I do have some further questions as a result of the further consideration that appeared in the officer report to this item. So I just want to ask those questions now. And you just need to give me 1 second till I can get forward. To the item. So the first question that I'll ask is, and perhaps this is effectively to the Manager of Governance, is it permissible for an amendment to be made to 2B to delete B, so that 2 basically indicates if negotiations with applicant 1 doesn't proceed, Council is only authorising the CEO to proceed with negotiations with applicant 1, with applicant 2. Sorry, I haven't made myself clear. Sorry, I was looking at this. I'm looking at too many numbers. So it would be to amend B to delete the further bit, and if necessary, applicant 3. So there would only be a negotiation with applicant 2 if applicant 1 was not available. So that would mean we wouldn't then go to applicant 3. Is that possible to for an amendment to be made to that effect?
Yes, I think we can do that.
All right, so that's only really clarifying if an elected member can make an amendment to take out negotiations with applicant 3 as a backstop position if we didn't get through applicant 2 after having failed with applicant 1. Thank you. So the next question that I have relates to the additional information that has been provided, which indicates that applicant 1 was offering less than the market valuation according to the additional information that was provided in question 24, which says that an appropriate market rental in the range of $27,500 to $30,250 per annum is a rental value for the property. but applicant 1 is proposing considerably less than that. So now I think I'm going to go to the Chief Operations Officer and ask, is there an option for council to authorise the CEO to negotiate with applicant 1 for the lease of 10 Ken Street on the basis of a higher rental than they have offered in their key terms? Ms Libicus.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. It is still open to us to negotiate with the applicants.
All right, thank you. In terms of the questions as the further information as I understand it about the district centre zoning making a difference to the type of tenant that the town could consider for the property, and the answer indicates that a proposed district centre zoning which is being worked on currently contemplates a wider range of uses and could make a difference to the type of tenant the town considers for the property. So am I right in understanding that if council were not to approve the recommendation at this time because it wants to await the district centre zoning for when that comes in, is it open to council to suggest or resolve to give applicant 1 a lease for a shorter period of time, noting that they've only proposed 2 years anyway, that would then allow the town to consider its position again once the district centre zoning had taken place? Is that possible, Ms Libicus?
I'm just looking towards our manager of property and leasing in the back row.
Have
there.
no difficulty if you need to speak to him. If he wants to come forward and speak to you, that's fine.
Thank you.
I mean, I do think it's probably somewhat along the similar lines to the first question about going back to try and look at negotiating potentially a different rental. This would be a different expiry level of the term of the lease.
Thank you for indulging me. The answer is yes, we can negotiate the term.
All right, thank you. My final question in relation to the further information that was provided in paragraph 29, which relates to the sinking fund. So understand that nothing was specified by the town in the expression of interest process, but the applicant applied a calculation of $114 per square metre to their offer. Are we able to get some information from the town about, or do we know how the applicant came to ascribe the $114 per square metre for the sinking fund? Ms Libicus?
That information isn't available to me at this time, but happy to take that one on notice.
Okay, so by that I'm assuming it means that it was provided by the applicant, but they didn't say how they'd come about that rating. Okay, understand that. In terms of the answer with regards to the sinking fund, it does indicate in paragraph 29 of further consideration that a sinking fund allows the organisation to gradually accumulate funds for known future expenses such as major maintenance. It helps demonstrate the organisation is responsibly managing assets. So I'm trying to get some clarification. If that's the purpose for the sinking fund, and this applicant is proposing a 2-year lease with no option to renew or no further term, what is the town's view about the benefit of the sinking fund, given that it's unlikely that an applicant seeking a 2-year lease would need to accumulate funds for future expenses such as major maintenance? I'm wanting to try and understand why the sinking fund has been offered or is of some value to the town, given that I think later on in answers it indicates that sinking fund would be approximately $1,080 per year for each of the 2 years of the proposed lease. Again, if you want to discuss that matter with the manager, I'm happy to allow that.
So in the assessment of the officers, the sinking fund provided the assurance to the town that the applicant one was looking to be responsible in their approach. So it wasn't like they would walk away when things got hard, or they weren't making provision if something went wrong. So it was all about demonstrating their preparedness for fiscal responsibility.
All right, thank you. So now I'm looking for some advice as to what would be the appropriate wording of a proposed amendment to point 1 of the officer's recommendation that would allow the CEO to negotiate with the applicant for a lease on better terms than applicant's terms, than applicant one's proposed key terms as to the rental.
So, Mayor, I would suggest that we update the consistent with key terms as outlined in attachment 2 to better reflect the market value of the rates.
All right, thank you. So I'm looking to move an amendment to this item, and I'm going to need to read it out, and apologies, I don't have it typed out, but it would be, the amendment will be to amend point 1 of the recommendation by inserting the following words: after East Victoria Park and before consistent for an improved offer as to the annual rental to better reflect the market rental valuation obtained by the town. And otherwise. And that's the sum total of that amendment. So that would mean that point 1 would end up reading, assuming the amendment were to be successful, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to negotiate with applicant 1 for a lease for 10 Kent Street, East Victoria Park, for an improved offer as to annual rental to better reflect the market rental valuation obtained by the town and otherwise consistent with key terms as outlined in attachment 2 and in accordance with policy 310 leasing and licensing. And the second part of my proposed amendment is in 2B to delete the words "and if necessary, applicant 3 in order of preference." And yeah. And delete the words "and for." All right, apologies everyone for the delay. So the amendment I intend to move is that 1, amend point 1 of the officer recommendation by inserting the following words after East Victoria Park for an improved offer as to annual rental to better reflect the market rental valuation. It should say as obtained by the town and otherwise. And secondly, amend point 2B of the officer recommendation by A, deleting the words and if necessary applicant 3 in order of preference, B, deleting the word respective, and C, deleting the words and for. So I'll now give my reason for proposing these amendments. In relation to the amendment to point 1, I'm proposing that amendment so that we can, in accordance with our leasing policy, maximise the rental return on our asset, given that the town has a market valuation for the annual rental for this property, reflective of the current market, given it, the date of it is February 2026, and applicant 1's proposal for rental is considerably below that when compared to applicant 2's proposal for rental. So I think it does behove us to look for what is the best value that we can possibly get. And that is not to say that the CEO has to change a view about the negotiations, but it gives them an opportunity to open up a discussion with the applicant about their ability to offer more by way of the annual rental that would better reflect that market valuation. The amendment to point 2B is really to say, based on the report and the evaluation that was done of the expressions of interest, applicant 3 ranked Baillie above 50%, and because of that, it suggests to me that the officers were of the view that applicant 3's proposal was generally quite weak, and so I'm not sure why it would be in the best interests of the town to consider negotiating with applicant 3 if applicant 1 and 2, who have considerably better proposals for us to consider, that we would then take applicant 3, noting that the information we got at the ABF was that the district centre zoning is likely to come online in about 18 months' time, and that may open up a new category of tenants for us. And there may be other interim options that are available over and above what applicant 3 is proposing. And the wording there is just the appropriate words that would take out the negotiation part referring to applicant 3. So those are my reasons. I'm now seeking a seconder for my proposed amendment. All right, that has been seconded by Councillor Ingram, so I'll just speak to this amendment. There can be, when one reads the officer's report, a first view that applicant 1 offers considerable benefit as a town tenant, and I completely understand and agree with that. Applicant 1 makes a case for the rental of 10 Kent Street, as indeed does applicant 2. There is a fundamental difference here. Applicant 2, who's rated lower than applicant 1, actually proposes a much higher annual rental, but equally appears to be offering activities that will be considerably beneficial to the community. But applicant 1 is proposing that their substantive business will be a retail shop operating out of the premises. So that is effectively a for-profit business. And although they have activities that then also are complementary to that, including workshops and the like for community members that will be of value, it is important for us to recognise that applicant 1 offers a 2-year lease with no proposal that they would have a further term, which means at the end of the 2 years, the town will have to re-advertise this property to the open market. Now, at that time, if it's rezoned for the district centre, that may create other opportunities for the town, but then again, the officers have been conservative in their estimate of what likelihood we would get for a different type of tenant for a property that is somewhat constrained by its location and its size. So on that basis, applicant 2, again rated lower by the town's officers, was offering 3-year lease plus 2 options to renew, which would actually give a tenant of some longevity in this particular location, noting that the property has been renovated by the town in recent years at a cost of over $300,000. And so we are looking for someone who will be a tenant in the position to be there for quite some time and embed themselves into the community. So I think in terms of that, the consistent difference between applicant 1 and 2 is not just the amount of the rent they'll pay. Applicant 1 appears to have been rated higher because of the things that they propose to give back to the community through their offerings. It stands to reason that if we're to ensure that our assets are actually for the benefit of all ratepayers, optimised in terms of the rental value that they will bring in, noting that it is likely that all structural matters will still remain the responsibility of the town, and the long-term upgrades of this property will remain as the obligations of the town, giving a relatively short-term lease to a tenant who, despite offering a sinking fund, showing that they're looking to be responsible, is only looking for a relatively short tenure of our property. And that might mean we miss out on a tenant who is offering a lot longer in terms of applicant 2 to be in the in situ in the premises. So for those reasons, I think it is appropriate to consider whether in negotiations the CEO can see if applicant 1 will better their offer. It doesn't mean this resolution that applicant 1 has to offer the market valuation because the words are an improved rental offer other than the one they have currently provided. And as for applicant 3, I do think that the rating that the town staff provided for applicant 3 in the evaluation shows that there aren't sufficient reasons why we ought to consider applicant 3 as a future tenant for this building, given that we already have applicant 1 and applicant 2 with strong proposals. So those are the reasons for my amendment. Councillor Ingram, did you want to be heard?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I wholeheartedly support the amendment. I think you've alluded to pretty much the majority of the reasons as to why. I would like to see a potential for renegotiation with a higher rental yield, would be preferable, but also there is the intrinsic benefit that doesn't appear to necessarily have been touched on, which I think you referred to, regarding the longer standing tenant and the ability that they will have to integrate within the community. I just think that that's perhaps something we might want to consider as opposed to a 2-year tenant term. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor Miles, sorry, did you have a question?
Am I able to answer some questions of the staff? Yep. I was just wondering, in the in number 10, it says that use of the property needs to comply with the following requirements: a community-based organisation that provides educational social services for community benefit. So would the town expect that the organisation would be paying market rate or close to market rate?
Ms Lubickas?
The evaluation really tried to balance the income with the community benefit. And so we were really testing, the expressions of interest tested the market to see what that looked like as a package. We'll certainly try to get closer to market value, but it's hard to predict whether or not we'll get it.
And at the bottom of the report where you say the valuation was 27,000 to 30,000, was that is that for like a office space within the town, or would that be specifically for a office space that's allocated for a community purpose? That makes sense.
Ms Lubickas?
So the market valuation tried to predict and to compare with similar quality of and size of premises and similar locations within a property as well. So it tried to balance all of those things out.
And so it says the Arts Centre had a 3-year lease prior, which finished in 2025. Do we know, were they paying at or close to market rate, or did they have a peppercorn lease, or do we have any idea about that?
We're just getting Mr. CFO to check on that. I think the details of that were in the annual report that we adopted last night, were they not? There's a whole page devoted to leases and licenses for less than market value. Ms. Labickas?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. The Arts Centre was on a peppercorn rent at $1.
Was that the amount that the Arts Centre was paying for the additional space at 10 Kent Street? Or I know they pay a peppercorn lease for their premises, which is 12 Kent Street. Sorry? 10 is listed what, as peppercorn?
12 is listed in the report, for the annual report, not 10.
Right, so 10 doesn't feature in the annual report. Okay, that is interesting because 10 was leased to the Centre for the Arts in addition to 12 being leased to the Centre for the Arts. Because I remember when it came to council for them to take over the lease of the additional space next door to 12. Ms. Labickas?
We'll take that one on notice, thanks, Mayor.
All right, so it looks like I will have to take that on notice, Deputy Mayor Miles. That might not be ideal at this stage. Is it not possible, Mr. CFO, to find out what lease payment was made by the Centre for the Arts for 10 Kent Street in the last financial year? As in, I'm assuming they were tenants up until 30 June 2025. But while you're looking for that, Deputy Mayor Miles, did you have other questions to ask about this?
I guess my final question is, I was just curious, obviously you said we're trying to weigh up the community benefit with the costs, and I wonder, I guess maybe I have two questions, because I guess what would you understand to be an improved offer? Like, is an improved offer $10 more, or is an improved offer more than $10 more?
Well, that might be a little unfair, Deputy Mayor Miles, because the proposed amendment is an improved offer to better reflect the market rental value. So that would tend to answer that question for you, as in a $10 increase in the annual rental over and above the 12 odd thousand would not be considered to be anything that better reflected the market rental valuation. But I agree with you, $10 more would be better than $10 less, but not by comparison to the wording in my proposed amendment, because that wording is pegged to better reflect the market rental valuation.
So
Hope that helps.
So assumably, because no, maybe actually I need to ask you this. So if applicant one couldn't increase their offer or didn't increase it to the same amount as applicant two, and so then we went to applicant two, would you be wanting applicant two to also be bettering their rental proposal, or you're happy with applicant 2?
Well, I think my position at the moment is applicant two's proposal is much closer to it, to the market valuation that we've been given details of, and noting that the answer in 31, the further consideration report, indicates that applicant 2 is a community organisation, just as it indicates that applicant 3 is a not-for-profit organisation and applicant 4 is a community organisation. But there actually isn't a description of applicant 1 in terms of the type of entity it is. So perhaps in order for me to finish that off, I'll actually go back to Ms Labicus and ask a question. Question 31 was asked, it did ask the town to provide a more detailed comparison of each applicant. For example, are they a sole trader, a company or a not-for-profit? And I note that the answers provided answer that in relation to applicants 2, 3 and 4, but not applicant 1. Ms Labicus?
I'm just getting advice on that one.
That's
but
fine.
in the meantime, I've had confirmation that the previous lease yielded $5,000 per annum.
Does that help, Deputy Mayor Miles?
Yes. Are you waiting for the answer for your other question first? Yep.
But if you've got another question in the meantime, I understand Ms Labicus is waiting for assistance from her manager, who's busily doing that now.
Okay, so I guess thinking about the fact the previous rent was 5,000 and this is, I assume we can't talk about numbers because they're in the confidential attachments, is that correct? Or the numbers in the confidential?
The attachments are not confidential.
Oh, excellent.
No.
Okay.
We
Good.
just don't.
I wasn't wearing my glasses.
We've only got
so
applicant 1, 2, 3, 4.
That- I knew
so we don't
something
have
was-
identification of the parties.
Okay, so so last year, even up to this year, no, last year, 2025, someone was paying 5,000 a year. Applicant 1 is offering 12,540, and then applicant 2 is offering an increase to that of $7,460 a year. I mean, does the town think that it is worth pursuing an extra $7,460 a year for this property? And I guess what I mean is, do they think it's worth the risk of going back to applicant 1 and asking them for an increase in rent? Potentially they may not be able to, and so they may pull out. Does the town think that's a bigger risk, not having their preferred applicant 1 in the building, or does the town think pursuing the extra $7,460 a year would be worth taking that risk and then going with applicant 2 if applicant 1 pulled out?
Ms Labicus?
So from what I understand, applicant 1 isn't a not-for-profit. They seek to break even. So there is a potential that we will lose applicant 1. So yes, it is a risk. And there's just under 20% difference in terms of balancing those other things out. So I guess it's around what council value more, whether it's the additional income or the other community outcomes.
No more questions? Councillor Crozer.
Thank you. I have questions. For applicant 1, they were not applicable when it came to the further lease. Is there clarification on whether they were leaving that open or whether they were definitively saying that they would not seek a lease beyond 2 years?
Ms Labicus?
I'll seek advice on that. Thanks, Mayor. Sorry for the delay. We had the wheel of death, is the internet. So in their proposal, they did not indicate that they would be receptive or not to an extension. They did request, however, that if we wish to terminate the term of the lease sooner, that we give them around 6 months' notice. But that's as far as their proposal went.
Anything further, Councillor Cruiser?
Could we get any idea from staff about the resourcing implications of further negotiations? How much staff time might need to be devoted to this? Anything else like that?
So, Councillor Cruiser, were you referring to, when you say further negotiations, point 1 of the officer's recommendation already talks about negotiating with applicant 1 for a lease. So you're referring to something further over and above that? Because I'm assuming that if this amendment were being made, it's authorising the CEO to do a negotiation with them. So you're looking for something extra, or?
Sorry, just to clarify, since we haven't had an opportunity to have staff feedback on this amendment, I wanted to know if changing point 1 might require further might put further requirements on staffing time, whether it would fall within the negotiations already set out in point 1, whether there would be any implications that it would be useful for us to consider or not.
Okay, Ms Lebickas?
Yes, if we are deviating from their application, the basis of application, it would necessitate, I guess, more time to negotiate and a bit more back and forward. But we are confident that we can accommodate that.
Councillor Gordon-Manley.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Can I ask how long negotiations or finding a tenant has been going for so far?
Ms Lebickas? I think the officer report talks about when the expression of interest process began.
So the expression of interest period began on in August of 2025, late August. We received all of the applications. We then received advice that the basis for the prospectus was anticipating the change in land use, not the current one. And we actually went back to each of the proponents to actually get them to seek their receptivity and their ability to adapt to those changing arrangements. So there's already been a little bit of back and forth and clarifications.
Mm-hmm.
Anything further, Councillor Gordon-Manley? Can I get you to switch your microphone off, please? Thank you. All right, so if there are no other questions, we've had 2 speakers in favour of the amendment. Is there any dissent to the amendment? Deputy Mayor Miles?
Given everything that's been discussed, I would prefer to keep with the officer's initial recommendation. I understand the points, but I feel like the difference in rent is pretty small relative to the town's sort of annual income, and I think the community benefit is important, and I would not want us to lose the opportunity to have applicant 1 in the building, and so rather than put that at risk, I would prefer to stick with the original officer recommendation in this case.
Thank you. Yes.
I am open to point 2, so point 1, but I'm happy to remove applicant 3. I probably should have specified that.
Okay.
If you were to split it into 2.
Okay, so that would, okay, all right. So I can accommodate the request to split it in 2, but thank you for making that point clear. All right, so we've had a speaker against the amendment. Is there anyone who wants to speak for the proposed amendment? Councillor Ingram, noting you have spoken, have you got questions?
Yes, just quickly, I wanted to clarify something that was asked in the bevy of questions there. What was the rental yield from the last financial year?
Ms. Libicus?
$5,000.
That means that the differentiation between the two applicants would be a significant amount in the town's position.
Ms. Libicus?
I guess so.
I might ask a question then. In terms of the last tenant, they ended, say, a 3-year lease that they'd had of this premises, the Victoria Park Centre for the Arts.
Sorry, just bear with us.
That's all right. Yeah, so point 2 of the officer report indicates it was licensed to the Victoria Park Centre for the Arts from 2022 to 15 December 2025. So that was a licence. So my question then is, the Victoria Park Centre for the Arts, who otherwise occupied by a lease, number 12 Kent Street, the Centre for the Arts is a not-for-profit organisation. Is that our understanding for that? Yep. Okay. Anything further, Councillor Ingram? All right. I'm not hearing there's anyone else who wished to speak in favour of the amendment. Is there anyone else who wants to speak on the amendment? Councillor Gordon-Manley.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. From the review of the policy, our policy pretty clearly details the social impact and the social value. We've used this criteria and as a way to guide our decisions on it, and the staff have come back showing that applicant 1 meets that criteria, scoring 72%. If we want to review and change the criteria from social impact to a revenue-based system where we're just focused on, or revenue takes a higher rating on it, we can review the policy. But at this stage, our policy pretty clearly says that community benefit is a large part of our decision-making. At this stage, I'm going to advocate that a tenant that has scored so well, according to our staff, seems relatively strong. The second item that I think we discussed was the turnover of applicants. 2 years is a pretty long tenure. I think changing over and having new opportunities, new social businesses, or a diversity of tenants is not going to in any way negatively impact our community, but if anything, support it and provide more opportunity for entrepreneurs, provide more opportunity for social impact businesses. 2 years is a long time, allowing a business to establish themselves and then grow from there. With that stated, we also know that the applicant is already established in the community, holding a office close by and being successfully operating that. So a transition and location to them must show some benefit to them. So I don't think it's going to be a disconnect or our community will lose out by having a tenant there for 2 years. I would just again advocate social impact is a key value on how we use our criteria. I wouldn't really want me to look to deviate from that criteria. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon-Manley. Is there anyone else who wants to speak on the amendment before I close the debate? Councillor Crozer.
I do want to note my support for point 2 of this amendment. I think looking at the scoring there, it's very reasonable to say that either applicant 1 or applicant 2 would be wonderful additions to that property, and I would be very happy to see either of them in that space. But applicant 3 is perhaps not providing as much value to the community. Under other circumstances, I would probably ask to defer this item, but bearing in mind that EOIs have been open since August and people might be waiting, I think that it makes sense to make the decision tonight, and I would like us to stick with the officer recommendations since we haven't had time to fully appreciate what the consequences might be of deviating from the officer's recommendations in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wants to speak on the item? If not, I'm going to close the debate. All right, so look, I have heard the arguments that have been made. If I go to the point that was made about the policy and its focus on social impact, social impact is not the only value that is prescribed in the leasing policy, but I would point out that applicant 2 meets the bill for social impact. In fact, I'd agree with Councillor Crozer. Applicant 1 or applicant 2 would equally be socially beneficial for our community to be a tenant of this building. The fact of the matter is, what we have learned is that applicant number 2 is a community-based organisation seeking to put forward community programs and gatherings, and they have proposed a higher rental contribution. And it does say in the further information that I'm reading from in 31 that they have demonstrated relevant community experience. So in that regard, they certainly, in my view, meet the policy's definition for social impact. What they are offering, though, is a greater value for the rental return on the premises, and they are offering to be there for some period of time. And that longevity for community-based organisations in our community is important, that they don't simply come and go. So they're clearly looking to establish quite decent roots into our community for the long term. So given that applicant 1, in my mind, is only proposing just 2 years, and they're not proposing to ask us to even consider extending that longer, that is what pushes me to consider that we should be looking at whether or not applicant 1 can advance their proposal. They may not be able to, and frankly, I don't see the proposed amendment as requiring their application to fail if they end up saying they're not in a position to advance to better reflect the market value. If the CEO determines at the end of those negotiations that's still a valuable matter for the town, then that, in my view, could be the way the matter falls. If elected members feel like my proposed amendment doesn't give them enough certainty as to that, I would be willing to revise it so that in addition to it authorising the CEO to look for a better offer as to the rental, that the ultimate offer that is made by applicant 1 is then determined by the CEO. So prepared to consider that if others are willing to say that that might be worthwhile. But otherwise, I would be looking to my fellow elected members to indicate if they wished me to make a proposal to slightly amend my wording to reflect that. If there isn't enough appetite for that, then I maintain my view that the amendment as is proposed should be the one that is made. I'm appreciative that I've had an indication from 2 elected members that they are supportive of the second part, so I will propose to put them to the vote separately if that allows elected members their opportunity to consider the second point of my proposed amendment. But I would need somebody to indicate whether or not that is something they would wish me to do with the first part of the amendment. I consider it's not really that difficult. Because part 2 of the officer's recommendation is to authorise the CEO to negotiate with number 2 should negotiations with number 1 not be finalised. So if the CEO considers they're finalised, then the CEO wouldn't look to applicant 2. But, that's my position on it. So I'm asking for people's support for my proposed amendment. So on that basis, I've closed the debate, but I'm going to split the recommendations, or rather split the amendments, and so I'll be asking people at this stage, if the minute taker can note this, that we're asking you to vote on point 1 of the amendment only at this stage. So, Councillor Crozer.
Sorry, could I just ask for a clarification?
Yep.
You said that you might amend the wording slightly in point
I'd be
1.
willing to do that if people are interested in me doing that, but if they're not interested in me doing that, then I wouldn't look to do it.
It sounded like you had some wording ready to hand for how that might work.
Not necessarily ready to hand, but I don't know that it would be that difficult. Just give me 1 second if you'd like me to consider that. Deputy Mayor Miles. Sure.
Sorry, if the wording was amended, how much longer the process might take versus if we just supported the original recommendation?
Ms. Libicus.
That's really hard to assess. I should imagine that the offer that was put in with applicant 1, if their goal is to break even, it may stretch them a little bit to go too much closer, and there may be a little bit of to and fro.
Ms Labicus, myself and the Manager of Governance have looked at some additional words that could be added to the end of point 1, but we're interested and keen to hear from the Manager of Property Development and Leasing about whether those would be suitable words. So it would be at the end of what's proposed. It would be, there'd be a comma at the end of the current wording, so it's not up on the screen at the moment. You'd have to look at the officer recommendation, which ends with the words policy 310 leasing and licensing, but it would read like this: authorises the Chief Executive Officer to negotiate with applicant 1 for a lease for 10 Kent Street, East Victoria Park. For an improved offer as to annual rental to better reflect the market rental valuation obtained by the town and otherwise consistent with key terms as outlined in attachment 2 and in accordance with policy 310 leasing and licensing, comma, with final lease terms to be in the CEO's discretion. I'm seeing a nod of approval. Ms Labicus?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So, Councillor Cruiser, those would be the additional words that would be put on the end of point 1. So I think to make my amendment probably neat and tidy, it would probably just, I'd do amend point 1 to read, and then I'd just have the final wording. So you can see it, so I'll be substituting point 1 for this point 1. So rather than doing it the way I've done it, which is to just insert a couple of words into it, be to have the whole thing read as it would finally read. And it would add in those extra words at the end. So if the CEO does the negotiations and there's an improved, better offer as to rental that comes out of it, no matter what it might be, the CEO can make a determination in their final discretion. So that's as far as we got. So I'm happy to put that proposal forward, but if you consider that's not something you're interested in, then I won't look at doing it. You wanted to know what the extra words were? They're the extra words.
Sorry, Mayor Vernon, can I ask that that be repeated again? Thank you.
Yep, sure. So point 1 would read, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to negotiate with applicant 1 for a lease for 10 Kent Street, East Victoria Park for an improved offer as to annual rental to better reflect the market rental valuation obtained by the town and otherwise consistent with key terms as outlined in attachment 2 and in accordance with policy 310 leasing and licensing, comma, with final lease terms to be in the CEO's discretion. So that's what the compendious one would be if I added some additional words in. Councillor Cruiser?
That's more amenable, but I would like a moment to think about it, given that this is all
Well,
in the moment. So I'll wait till the voting if that's okay.
Why don't we do this? It's now past the 2-hour mark, and we usually have a break at the 2-hour mark. So it's now 8:40. So I'm proposing that we have a 10-minute adjournment to have our break, and that might be an opportunity for people to clear their thoughts on this. So I'm going to move that we adjourn for 10 minutes at 8:41 p.m. Can I seek a seconder for that, please? Seconded Deputy Mayor Miles. Is there any dissent to the proposal for the adjournment? No, there being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. We are adjourned for 10 minutes. Thank you. Right, everyone, we are back. Thank you to those who are still with us on live streaming. We've had a break. The wording of the first part of my amendment has now been circulated as what it will read, so that clears up any of the confusion about working out how it will sound. So this is now the proposal I put, but I need to ask my seconder, Councillor Ingram, if he is in agreement, because if he's not in agreement for that amendment to be made, it won't go anywhere. Councillor Ingram, you happy to indicate your agreement?
After deep consideration, yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we've already had all the debate in relation to this. So I'm now simply going to put this to the vote for this part before we go to the second part. Sorry. And if you could register my vote in favour of the amendment, since my computer's still not working. Councillor Melrosa, we don't have a vote registered for you as yet. Still nothing registered. Do you just want to indicate how you wish to vote on the amendment, for or against? Sorry, you need to say your vote. Okay. Yep. Oh, it's just come through now. Oh, you've resent it. All right. Okay. All right. So that amendment is carried. Those in favour, myself, Mayor Vernon, Councillor Ingram, Councillor Biondi, Councillor Melrosa and Councillor Gordon-Manley. Those against, Deputy Mayor Miles and Councillor Crozer. So that part of the amendment is carried. So we'll now put the second part of my amendment, as had been previously indicated, forward. And so if I could ask people if they would please vote on the second part of the amendment. And that second part of the amendment is carried unanimously. Thank you. So we now go back to the substantive recommendation as amended. And so on that basis, I'm going to formally ask, is there any dissent? No, there being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks everyone for your patience with that and your contributions to it. Item 13.2 is METRONET agreements. The recommendation here is really long and I'm not going to read it out, but the recommendation in general is for Council to endorse the execution of a number of agreements with the Public Transport Authority of Western Australia in relation to the management, maintenance and activation of Long Park and associated public space within Lot 9103, being land created as part of the Victoria Park Canning Level Crossing Removal Project. Can I seek, please, a mover and a seconder for the officer's recommendation? I did, didn't I? Mover and a seconder. Sorry, in case I thought I said I was seeking a mover and a seconder. Is that what I did say? Good. Okay. Sorry, I thought it was being suggested I had only sought one. All right, that's moved Deputy Mayor Miles, seconded Councillor Crozer. Deputy Mayor Miles, do you want to speak to this item?
Yes, please. So the METRONET project has brought a wonderful benefit to our community, in particular for the Carlisle community, which is the area in the town most lacking in public open space. I think for me to be gifted, for the town to be gifting $14.4 million of assets and such a large area of public open space that was basically previously inaccessible to anyone and located behind a barbed wire fence is like a real gift to the town. You know, as an urban local government, there was no way we would ever have had this much land ourselves that we could have dedicated to such a sort of project, and we would never have been able to fund that kind of capital works on this scale ourselves. Like basically, if we hadn't have teamed up and collaborated with METRONET, we never would have been able to afford it. And I think it's been really good the way that we've been able to collaborate with the state government and the local government together to really think about the best outcomes for the community, which basically are going to make this, it's a really well-used space. It's already really well used. It's already really popular with people in the area. It's going to make Carlisle and that part of East Victoria Park a much more desirable place to live. It's going to drive growth and development in the area. I really love the fact that the staff have been able to influence the assets that we've built. So, you know, we've got the adult exercise equipment near Harold Hawthorne. We've got play equipment fitting the young family demographic in Carlisle. We've got the basketball areas and the skate areas, which can serve the TAFE students as well as the older kids in the area. Like it's a park that's designed for the people that live there, and it's going to be well used and well loved. And I think the town has worked really hard to ensure the PSP integrates really well, that road impacts have been kind of reduced, that there's really good pedestrian access to the stations. The whole thing has been so collaborative kind of from the start, or at least as long as I guess it started in 2018, but from the time that I've seen, it seems like it's been a really collaborative project. And we will be able to now take this land and take these assets and maintain them in a far better way than the Public Transport Authority would be able to do. Maintaining parks is basically what we do. It's not what the Public Transport Authority do. Our depot is literally around the corner. We've got a really great team. We've got really good standards. We've been given $3.27 million to basically maintain it for 5 years. You know, we're going to be able to really keep this area clean and litter-free and maintain all the plantings and ensure that the trees grow and we get canopy, and we've got a really nice area. We'll be able to get the public toilet. At the moment, a lot of families are using the pub as the toilet because that's the closest one to the sort of play area, so it would be really great to add that in. You know, it's been a great project. It started in 2018. It's been a long time coming. I'm really looking forward to the town signing these agreements, taking on the maintenance, and I'm fully supportive of the officer's recommendation.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Miles. Councillor Cruiser, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, yes. I think that this is a beautiful space. I've visited many times already, and every time I've gone, it's been full of particularly families, and particularly families who, when I chat to them, they talk about how lovely it is to have this space so close to them. Many people who've come down with their kids on scooters or bikes or walk down with prams. I do know that I've heard from quite a few people in the community that they would really like to use it, but they're held back by the lack of a public toilet. And I think the sooner that we sign off on this, the sooner we can deliver that, particularly mums with little children and particularly mums with young girls who, without having a toilet close by, really feel like they're not comfortable using the space. So the sooner we can deliver that, the better. I think that we all know the frustrations of people in our community coming to us and saying they've got a problem with this intersection, or they've got a problem with that road, and us having to say, oh, that's actually a main roads issue, or that's actually controlled by the state. So we've seen that also with this park, of people raising concerns about different aspects of maintenance of the park and us saying, well, that's not currently in our hands. The sooner that we can take that on, start maintaining it to the standard our community expects, and also being able to respond to community feedback directly instead of directing them somewhere else where we have less control, the better. So I'd really like to see us get this signed off, get the toilet block built, and really have this space become a wonderful part of our town. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Cruiser. I'm going to ask, as I always do, so that we can determine if there's debate, if there is anyone who is in dissent of the officer recommendation, because that will mean we will go to debate. No councillors are indicating they're in dissent, however I'm in dissent, so on that basis we will be having a debate on this matter. But I do have some questions that I'd like to ask before I make my remarks. So the first one that I want some clarification on for the record, please, is given that the licence agreement says it's a non-exclusive licence use for 10 years over the LGA's property and the PTA's property as defined in the documentation, what happens at the end of the licence agreement period of 10 years? Ms Libicus?
So my understanding, Mayor Vernon, is that the assets are gifted to us and they remain in our care and control beyond that 10-year period.
Thanks, Ms Libicus. I need to explore this with you further because the licence agreement currently says it's for the non-exclusive use of what is the PTA's rail corridor, and my understanding is that property remains the property of the PTA and it will remain so for all time. And so once the licence agreement, which is a non-exclusive licence to use the property that they wish us to maintain, there's no provision as I read it in the licence agreement for any extension of the licence. So at the end of the time when we have a non-exclusive right to use the property and there's no more money left for us to maintain the premises, is it then the case that it's the PTA's property, we don't even have a non-exclusive licence to go on the property, but we're being expected to maintain it? Like, this is something that I feel needs to be clarified so people understand what it means. Ms Libicus?
Sorry, Mayor Vernon, I'll just take a minute to clarify my thought.
Yep, sure.
Sorry, Mayor Vernon, from the information I have in front of me, that the expectation is that the assets will transfer to us and become effectively our assets upon execution of the agreements and will remain with us.
Okay, but just so I'm clear, when we're talking about assets, we're talking about the children's play equipment, the flying fox, that sort of thing. We're not talking about the land, which remains the PTA's. Is that right?
That's right.
All right, thank you. I have another question. It follows up from one asked by Councillor Minson at the Agenda Briefing Forum, where he asked whether it was the town's understanding that once we undertook to engage in the maintenance for the period of the licence agreement, would the town then, at the conclusion of the licence agreement, be able to retire any of those assets if it turned out over a period of time some of them have become underutilised, become out of fashion, needed to be replaced for any particular reason. The town would have complete ability to do that at the end of the licence agreement. Ms Lepicus.
My understanding is that so the expectation is that the area remains functional. There were in discussions with PTA through the course of these agreements, it was recognised that the life of the assets means that some of the play equipment may become obsolete and some of the other equipment may become obsolete. So, we would move to replace those over time with what was on the market at that time and what fitted the demographic of that time. So in terms of the play equipment, the exercise equipment, that certainly was a principle that was discussed through those working groups and other things. But if we're suggesting that we want to potentially fill in the skate ball or any of those sorts of things, we would need to, or fill in the skate equipment, we'd need to work with PTA to work through whether or not that was considered a change in function of the land.
All right, thank you. I definitely understand why there is public open space that members of our community will enjoy in the PTA's rail corridor. This has been constructed by the state government. It is worthwhile remembering that the state government didn't consult the town of Victoria Park prior to making its decision that it would be elevating the rail, and thereafter made their own decision that they would be putting infrastructure into the public realm space that would be created underneath the rail line. I consider this is an occasion where there is cost shifting by the state government down to local government. So all of the infrastructure assets have been built on the PTA's land, which means the PTA may be gifting swings and outdoor adult exercise equipment, but it's not gifting the land to the town of Victoria Park. So we're being asked to maintain in perpetuity a degree of infrastructure that members of our community can use if they wish to do so, noting that not all members of our community will use this space due to their proximity or lack thereof to it. And so what I see is that we have 5 years worth of funding that's been allocated to us to maintain both the PTA's property and the licensee's property according to the funding agreement and the licence agreement. And when that money runs out, it will then not only become the town of Victoria Park and its future council's responsibility to pay for the ongoing maintenance of the public realm space, but also ultimately its capital replacement cost. And we don't have any good indication, as I can see it in the officer report, as to what that might end up being in terms of whole of life costs on an ongoing basis. There is a lot of infrastructure that has been created in the section of Long Park within the town of Victoria Park, and I consider that future ratepayers are going to be paying a great deal of money for this space to be maintained, particularly if it's to be maintained at the level at which it appears now. And for me, that's going to then be a constraint on our resources, and it's likely to cause decisions to be made with regards to rates that will have to be increased, whether there are more people who come to live in that area or there are not. And it will also mean that choices of priorities will have to be made about future infrastructure upgrades in other parts of the town that we and future council might wish to install, but find that their ongoing obligations to Long Park prevent us from putting those matters forward as a priority. What I heard said from the administration at the agenda briefing forum in an answer to, I guess, a question from Councillor Minson was what would happen if council were not to sign these agreements, who would maintain the public realm spaces that have been created through the METRONET project? And the answer from the Chief Operations Officer was that it would be the state government via the PTA. So on that basis, I see no reason why the PTA can't continue to do that. It may not be their bread and butter maintaining public realm spaces of this nature, but I'm pretty sure they're pretty good at entering into a contract to simply hand over maintenance to a contractor who can do whatever maintenance is needed and at the appropriate time can make whatever replacements need to be made. Either way, I'd consider that our community would continue to have this space available to it, whether the town of Victoria Park takes on the financial responsibility of this or not, based on those answers. So for those reasons, I won't be supporting the officer's recommendation. Is there anyone now who wishes to speak in favour? This is in accordance with our meeting procedures local law. Councillor Gordon-Manley.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we've seen some evidence of some state-owned assets in local government areas that have been left to become almost derelict. This is not at any service to the community. What we have powered through local government is our community can advocate to us directly, and most often we can get changes for them directly. My fear at this stage is if we do not engage in it and support this project, therefore providing these great assets to an area of the community that is often forgotten there in Carl, we will see these great assets deteriorate and become a place for adverse behaviour, not be welcoming for the residents, and then also not support that great growth that we see along that corridor there. With the changes to the zoning of the area, I'm really optimistic about the increase in residents and the growth in that area that will see it a welcoming, inviting and exciting part of our community. So predominantly I'm focused on that, is that there is a social and economic loss from not maintaining these that we will potentially put in onto a party that has historically demonstrated that they may not listen to the community advocating. Key point, Perth Park. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon-Manley. Is there someone who now wishes to speak against the officer recommendation? Councillor Ingram.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I'd actually like to seek a couple of questions for clarification, if I may. So the first was regarding the non-exclusive licence agreement. Does that mean that the PTA could offer a similar access or right of use of access of this particular stretch of land to another party? And if so, would the town then be up to pony up the maintenance or repair costs of anything that may or may not happen there as some sort of event space, perhaps?
Ms. Lepicus.
Because it's non-exclusive, then there is a potential that there is a potential that there may be events or other things held on that land. However, my understanding is that the intent is to work through that with the local government to make sure that they're compatible with land uses. So and I guess that's what part of the SECA work was intended to do. So when we first got the agreements, it was very heavily swayed in the PTA's direction with little, little balance for the requirements of the local government. And what we tried to do through that process is actually create a bit more balance in that, a bit more reciprocity. So just as if we wanted to use the land for any unapproved purposes that were set out in the agreements, we would speak with PTA. The expectation would be that the same would come our way.
Okay, understanding that. Following on from that, is there any, I suppose, potential to look to have that in some way, shape or form placed into the structure of the agreement or referred to in some way? Because at the moment it sounds like it's not formalised as part of what we're being asked to accept.
Ms Labicus?
So we could certainly go back and ask PTA that question. I know that there's been considerable drafting changes that's gone through this process, so we can certainly to ask for that to be reflected.
Following on from that, would we regard the asking of that to be something that's quite onerous or particularly difficult to overcome before accepting the agreement, or is that something that could be amended and added to through a schedule or something later on? What sort of options are available there?
Ms Labicus?
My understanding, the best way to do that is to actually go and ask for an amendment to the agreement with that intent, and then have our drafters, our legal drafters, work with their counterparts to work out the best mechanism to get that for us. Because I guess 90% of the agreement is replicated across the whole Armidale line.
Thank you very much. With that in mind, I suppose this one's a little bit of a circumspect question, but do we have any sort of gauge on the appetite that may be there to accommodate such a request if we were inclined to make it as council?
Ms Labicus?
So I can't speak to that specific requirement, but there was significant reluctance to actually get the extent of the balance that we've already got. So that was probably an 8-month process of back and forward.
Great, thank you. So if council was to proceed and accept the agreements as presented, there is no clear formalised process for that going back and forth, both between the council and the PTA and the PTA and the council when it comes to the otherwise licensed use, or are potential looking to utilise the space as we would like to do. Is that correct?
Ms Labicus?
No, I believe if we are using the space for anything that other than that is authorised in the agreement, we then go back to PTA. But there are fairly broad uses that are specified in the agreement at the moment, and I guess the assessment of the local governments as a whole is that they covered probably 80% of what we may want to use that land for into the future. So the agreement caters for that direction currently.
Any further questions, Councillor Ingram? Or not at this time?
Not at this time, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Prior to those questions, I had asked, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the officer recommendation? No one had indicated at that stage that they did. So now I'm just going to throw it open and say, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this item, either for or against, so that we can close the debate? And if there's no one else who wants to speak, we'll just close the debate. Councillor Melrosa.
I've had a deep think about this, and I've been on both sides of this in my head, but I've landed on supporting this, and I'll outline the reasons why. We're being asked to endorse the execution of the METRONET agreement so that the responsibility for the Long Park and public open space can be formally transferred to us. This project is already complete and our community is already out there using this space, myself included. And the state, while this process is going on, is still drawing down on the money to maintain this space. And that money is coming out of the money that we'll get at the end of this project. The report makes clear that the delay reduces the town's funding and increases uncertainty around the maintenance of the space. And that has some risk and issues around our future assets. So I think given that 2 other local councils have already signed their agreements, I could be pretty much assume that the state is going to be unlikely to entertain a renegotiation of this agreement just on the basis of our refusal. I think that just puts out to everybody else that signed the agreement that this is a little bit unfair. I think we've gone through a joint process to even get to this point, and of course it would have been difficult to negotiate with the state government as a bunch of local governments. So I feel like what we've got is what we're going to get. Refusing to proceed now risks isolating us as a town and damaging our relationship with the state, which is, I think, a really important thing to consider given the scale of the project and the impending precinct planning that we have coming up. I think the funding agreement definitely places long-term obligations on the town, and the officers have identified how we can safeguard ourselves from that. So getting LGI's confirmation, the defect rectification, irrigation compliance, and the complete asset data is obviously important. That ensures that the town doesn't accept the responsibility of the assets and ownership blindly. And I guess as well, obviously, if we agree to the agreement, we get the toilet, which is important because everyone is using the pub, myself included. Although I go for a beer when I use the toilet there, so they're not losing out on just providing me space to relieve myself. I think reading the agreement, it's not perfect. The wording in the agreement appears to me to be distinctly in favour of the PTA, and I'm not surprised by that. But the project delivers things that we wouldn't be able to deliver ourselves, or if we did, it would be very, very difficult. And I think by not signing it, we obviously have an issue with the funding disappearing, $46,000 a month or 43 or whatever it was. I think there's some definite reputational damage that could occur as a result of it. And obviously the assets will be deteriorating the entire time we mull over this. I think proceeding now with the agreement is probably the best option, most pragmatic option. And ultimately the benefit to our community and the opportunity for development around this asset are substantial, and they bring significant long-term gains to the community and our town. And while I definitely understand the sentiments being put forward by the Mayor in relation to additional rates and or balancing the town's obligations for improvement elsewhere, I think this is just something that we need to accept and get on with it. So on that basis, I will be supporting.
Thanks, Councillor Melrosa. Is there anyone else who wished to speak, or we'll go back to the mover to close the debate? No. On that basis, we'll go back to the mover then to close the debate. Deputy Mayor Miles.
So under the agreements, METRONET are giving us $3.247 million to maintain Long Park for 5 years, and the town staff have advised us that if we are able to make these funds last longer, then we can do so. And the fact that we have a parks team in-house suggests that this might be possible. As part of signing the agreement, we get an additional $200,000 to fund a public toilet. If we do not sign the documents, I can't see anywhere listed where there's a requirement for the PTA to spend $3.247 million on Long Park. It seems like if we sign or we don't sign, then that is void. So we have agreed standards, and these standards are only being met because METRONET is basically agreeing to meet them until we've signed the paperwork. If we don't sign, then it seems to me that PTA could maintain it to the standards that they want. So we've got no idea how quickly and to what standards they'll maintain this. So I guess for me, there's the scenario where the town maintains it, we keep everything looking great. Potentially there's the scenario under the PTA where there's graffiti, litter, dead trees, dead lawn, damaged equipment, not because they necessarily don't want to maintain it, but just because they will be a lot less responsive than the depot, which is around the corner, because the PTA just don't have that many any parks really to maintain. regardless of if it's in the PTA's realm to maintain, the community won't understand that. The community will see dead litter, litter, graffiti, dead trees, they'll see it as the town's responsibility. We'll still be getting all of the negative feedback. I guess ultimately, I think the town and METRONET undertook this project collaboratively and kind of in good faith that we would eventually take over the maintenance. I echo Councillor Morose's concerns about the reputational damage we might occur. I feel like we've pushed for outcomes that would be best for the town, and the understanding was that ultimately we would take over the maintenance. One of the things that I remember we talked about in a concept forum was the local governments collectively, like the corridor, pushing for the PTA to provide funding for us for 5 years. There was an initial proposal that it would be for 2 years, and we got this compromise. We got this funding for 5 years. I had spoken to the mayors of Canning and the mayor of Gosnells at a WALGA meeting. We were discussing the METRONET project, so Canning and Gosnells have both signed their agreements. And the kind of shared sentiment among the Secca corridor is that the community has got a wonderful benefit from this project. Each local government has been gifted access to public open space. We've got assets that meet our community needs that we wouldn't have been able to afford otherwise, and we've kind of been working for this goal for a long time. I know that the City of Canning, City of Gosnells, City of Armidale are all different to us, but the feedback that they've all kind of provided is that they think this is a wonderful benefit to the town, to their towns, and I think we're in the same position. This is a really good opportunity for us, and I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
All right, thanks, Deputy Mayor Miles. So we'll now invite everyone to please vote. Sorry, I'm reloading. Councillor Gordon Manley, we're still waiting on your vote. Sorry. Yeah. Declare that's carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is 13.3 has been dealt with by exception resolution. So we come to item 13.4, which is the Elizabeth Baillie investigation report. So we have an officer recommendation, but I have given notice of my intention to move an alternative motion to be tested ahead of the officer's recommendation. Before I do that, I just want to double check in with Deputy Mayor Miles. I know that things have been moving pretty fast tonight, but I had sent you an email that I hope you've had some chance to look at, but you might not have, regarding the alternate motion.
I did not, because my internet wasn't working for the first 20 minutes of the meeting. I'll just have a quick look now.
It was sent to you long after the first 20 minutes of the meeting, so... So I think what I'll do is I will send the final version of the alternate motion to governance and elected members now. Elected members having seen several versions, I think, in the course of the last 2 days. Deputy Mayor Miles, did the document open for you when it was sent to you? The one that I sent to you? Because I had trouble opening it then, but I've sent it to everyone, but I'm not sure if it's
The one
come
you sent
through.
at 8:18? That one?
That would have
Yep.
been the one that I sent to you, yeah. All right, so I'm told that it should have come through by now. So I'll just get the minute secretary to put that alternate motion up.
Disregard that one.
No, that's not it.
Yeah.
That was the earlier version. Yeah.
Yeah. But we've got a few formatting issues. Tidied up on there.
Looks all right on
That's
me.
on the screen.
All right. So what is on the screen at the moment is the latest version of the alternate motion that was first circulated to elected members last week and has been the result of discussion amongst myself and the Deputy Mayor this afternoon and into just before the meeting started. So this is the alternate motion that I'm now proposing to move. I'm not going to read it out because it is quite long, but essentially it is different to the officer's recommendation because it seeks to be more structured in how we'll approach this going forward, and it has taken account of some feedback from a number of elected members who wanted to see certain things happen. But essentially, the alternate motion as it is currently being proposed does have some fairly brief reasons at the bottom of it. So maybe it is better if I just try to read through it. So the proposal is for Council to note the Elizabeth Baillie tree removal investigation report and the table of tree removals at attachments 1 and 2 to the officer report. Point 2 is a direction to the CEO to bring a report back to Council at the May 2026 meeting with his executive response to the investigation report, and there are a number of matters listed for him to address in doing so. The next provision in the alternate motion is for the CEO to conduct a review of Policy 255, the tree management policy, and to present a revised policy for consideration by all of us at a policy workshop by no later than the 30th of June of this year. The fourth part of the alternate motion is to direct the CEO to develop and commence implementation of a project management improvement program that would now be by no later than December 2026. There's a number of points that are listed there which are not intended to be an exhaustive list, but they are matters to be included in the course of developing that program. And they've come about as a result of feedback from the administration as well as the discussions between myself and Deputy Mayor Miles. The next paragraph number, which I think looks like the numbering might have gone slightly haywire, is that right? There's 2 lots of 4, so I think we might need to change that, but The next one is to direct the CEO to engage an external consultant to assist the town in developing this program. The proposal for that consultant to be engaged is 30 June. There's also provision in the next paragraph for directing the CEO to list for consideration in the coming budget any costs of any additional resourcing that might be required to give effect to this. There's then the next clause requires the program, so the improvement program, to be referred off to the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee for them to undertake ongoing monitoring of the development and the implementation of the program, and ultimately a review of the program post its implementation. It's also provision to direct the CEO to provide regular updates to that committee, but not beginning before June 2026 on the program. There's also a requirement for the CEO, a request to him to include project management for consideration as part of the town's next internal audit plan when that gets developed. And finally, to request the CEO to develop a tree planting program in collaboration with the Urban Forest Strategy Working Group. And in short, my reasons for this alternate motion is there is a need to include more specific directions to ensure, firstly, a structured program for project management improvement is developed and implemented containing specific and measurable deliverables with a timeline for completion to facilitate a new project management framework that's going to be fit for purpose. Secondly, improve governance and accountability through the implementation of the improvement program and associated deliverables being monitored and overseen by our Audit Risk and Improvement Committee, and also so that the CEO can lead the necessary changes that would address the findings in the investigation report with appropriate resourcing on the direction of Council. So, I know that everyone hasn't had a lot of time to look at the final wording, but it's probably not far different from the things that you will have seen from myself and Deputy Mayor Miles over the last few days. Deputy Mayor Miles.
Number 8, I think the Audit and Risk Committee doesn't meet until July, so I think it's going to be July 2026. It's number 7 in the word attachment, but number 8 on the...
But it will be number 8. So, yeah. Okay, sorry. I thought I'd taken that from the wording that you'd given me. So you say it's beginning from July. Okay, so that can be changed to... If that can be changed to July, thank you. So were there any other things, Deputy Mayor Miles, that you had spotted?
No, but don't hold me to that.
Okay. Well, I am going to ask you if you wanted to second this alternate motion.
Sure.
All right. You don't have to if you don't wish to. All right, so it's been seconded by Deputy Mayor Miles. So on that basis, I am going to speak to this motion. We obviously received the tree removal investigation report that's been carried out by the town, and that does indicate that quite apart from the removal of the trees, that there are broader issues around project management for the town to pay some attention to. And indeed, the officer recommendation already identifies what some of those matters might be, including around project management and the need for some maturity of the project management framework. To the extent that this alternate motion picks up from there and adds to it, it now puts those matters that have been identified in the officer's recommendation as forward-looking steps that the town should take. It puts them into a completed program. But I think importantly, it makes clear that Council is impressing upon the town a wish for that improvement program to be assisted with external independent consultants' assistance. I'm very mindful of the workload that the Chief Operations Officer has in charge of our very large capital works budget, with an awful lot of things going on and some really big things happening this year, particularly the negotiation of our waste collection contracts that will be coming up. And noting that the Elizabeth Baillie Park restoration is now completed and the project has been delivered, save for any ongoing small defects and as we work through future maintenance programs and the like. But now is the time to look at the fact that we do have some key findings. We do need to see a response, in my view, that comes from our CEO as to what he says about the findings, what he thinks are the key findings amongst those, and to let us know what executive actions he has taken and proposes to take, particularly with regards to ensuring that we can prevent any other unauthorised and unplanned tree removals. I think it is important that we do conduct a review of Policy 255, which seems to have been in a holding pattern now since we learned of the need for this investigation. In terms of taking that to a future policy workshop, we do have one scheduled in April, so it's not going to be possible to put it onto that workshop. But I have proposed that it comes to the June workshop because it may be that at the workshop further steps will need to be taken before it will be ready to come back to council for us to review. And it's quite clear to me the sooner we get underway with that policy work, the better, because the policy itself at the moment heavily focuses on street trees. We need to make sure that our parks trees and any trees that might be involved in capital projects going forward are going to get adequate policy protection. With the development of the Project Management Improvement Program, I see it as a much bigger work than it would appear in this particular alternate. It is to start something by developing it and commencing the implementation of it by no later than the end of this year. And that, I think, will be a really good start for us in understanding how we can address some of the systemic weaknesses and control areas that we need to work on. I think having an external consultant will be invaluable for the town because not only will it, I think, alleviate, the workload for the town staff, having someone dedicated to guide that process, but it will allow the town staff to make their own contributions into it, knowing that they have the benefit of someone external who is there to drive the project. And if that requires a further budget allocation, it's proposed that CEO can bring that back to us if the case requires it. Clearly, referring the program to the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee, in my view, is the right way forward because since the 1st of January, Audit and Risk Committees now have increased responsibilities for improvement. And so this is a classic improvement program that the Audit and Risk Committee has already set up through dashboard reporting to have captured audit style reports that will show how things are progressing. And that will be good because the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee is now led by an independent chair and an independent deputy chair. So their contributions to the oversight and monitoring will be invaluable as well. And seeking the potential for the CEO to include project management for the town's next internal audit plan means that when we go to look at the areas for performance audits in future, project management may very well fall within a future internal audit plan. And that's as distinct from us just going ahead and auditing our project management now, because that would be a big exercise because it would be much broader than just what happened with this particular project. And also because project management may be on the future plan for internal audit anyway. And obviously the final part is just to commit effectively the town to working with our Urban Forest Strategy Working Group to provide the replacement trees, and it's effectively in the same words as the officer's recommendation. So I think we end up with something that will see us do two things at once in parallel. One will be to get underway with the development and implementation of a project management improvement program that will take a lot longer to roll out, but at the same time we'll be taking some steps towards reviewing our tree management policy, trying to identify actions that would prevent any further unauthorised or unplanned tree removals, and going forward with some steps that will help us along the way. And hopefully we'll continue to learn more about this matter as time goes by. That's what I had to say. Deputy Mayor Miles, did you want to speak to this as a seconder?
I had a question first. So point 4, I realise we only half edited it, unless it's been magically changed on the screen. So it's the one about the external consultant. Might be Number 5. At the moment, it says engage an external consultant by 30th of June and bring a report to council by the April OCM. I know, I think when I had my separate one, it wasn't the April OCM, but also there was a question around whether there was a reason why the town had suggested the 31st of July rather than the 30th of June. So first it would be good to clarify that. I think with mine, because I'd worded it later, I was talking more about the 26-27 budget process rather than an OCM, but I think we could get some clarification around 5.
Yeah, all right. So clearly the town staff gave me some feedback around the dates, and they were proposing that they have until the 31st of July to engage an external consultant. And I have formed the view that 4.5 months to engage the consultant was too long a time frame. I saw no reason, and one wasn't offered, as to why it would take that long to engage an external consultant. So the choice of date was the 30th of June. I'm happy to ask the town staff about their position regarding 31 July. But the idea about bringing a report back to council by the next month is, if this resolution is passed, the town staff will certainly be aware that they need to engage an external consultant, and so they will know what money they have left in the budget for the next couple of months, whether they've got some budget that would allow them to engage someone by the 30th of June. And if there isn't sufficient budget, then they'd be in a position to bring a short report back to the April OCM asking for a budget allocation from us. So that was the framework of how that date came about, but more than happy to ask Ms Labicus about the reason the town staff had given me feedback that they wanted effectively till the end of July to be able to engage an external consultant.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I guess in terms of the April date with the OCM, I'm very conscious that that would mean that we would need to be in a position to have some costings from potential consultants within the next week, given our process for agenda settlement and papers to be prepared for ABF. We've identified 3 potential consulting groups that actually have the capability. What we're not clear on is whether or not they have capacity to be able to work through that process. And I guess we were mindful that between Easter and school holidays and Anzac Day, it's really difficult to work with contractors to be able to shore up proposals and to shore up those things. We really wanted to take the time to ensure that the scope was correct, and the scope was reflective of what we needed to give us that that ability to go to market with absolute clarity.
Deputy Mayor Miles?
So I guess if we stick to the 30th of June, does the May OCM work better, or are you saying the June OCM works better, or are you saying the 31st of July is better for both in your ideal world?
Ms Labicus?
So I am concerned that we won't understand the quantum of monies that we will need until May, and we won't necessarily understand whether or not, because I guess the number of, the first thing we did was go and have a look at the Walga panel to see who may be available and have that capability, and we couldn't identify anyone with that capability. So for us, it would be about understanding who's out there and working out the approach to market, working out all of those things. So we do know that it will absolutely be an RFQ process, and I guess that then sets up an additional level of rigour in terms of evaluation processes and other things. So I guess for me, I would rather take a little bit of time. If we can bring that on board earlier, then that will absolutely be the direction that I'd like to take, because, you know, so for me, once you know this stuff, you can't unknow it, and you need to move forward with it. I guess what I didn't want to do was to set us up to not meet the expectations because of things beyond our control.
Anything further?
So is the May OCM still too early, in your opinion?
Ms. Libicus?
I think the June OCM would be better for us, and then we can, as we start to engage in the new financial year, then we can work through that budget.
Okay, so this might be more of a question for the Chief Financial Officer, but if it was going to be the June OCM, is it then just better to build it into the budget process so that we start the 26-27 budget with something allocated and work it in that way, or would it still be better to come to the OCM with a proposal?
Like the Chief Operations Officer, there's a sweet spot getting the scope right, but also being quick to react as quick as we can. So just from a logical point of view, the June OCM is the 16th of June. If we have to the end of June to engage a consultant, that would probably work out okay, because there's sort of 2 weeks where we could still go to quote. We would have a quantum of what we may need if we still want to do the 30 June deadline. To build it into next year's budget is also a valid option, but I think any new budget request on the 16th of June OCM would tie in with our engagement timeline of 30 June, if that's what you still want to desire. I don't see that as put April or May. I'm just cautious that we will still be probably in a band of what we might expect this consultant to be. We may have early indication, but you know, I just don't know. We just don't know at this point in time.
How do you feel about putting them both as June? So the 30th of June and then the June OCM?
Well, I was going to ask the Chief Financial Officer, if that's the case, and if we were working on engagement of the consultant by the 30th of June, do we even need a report to come back to Council with regards to a budget allocation, given that you can put it in the 26-27 budget what you pay them? Do you need to have a budget allocation before you can engage them?
Good.
If you're engaging them by the 30th of June.
Well, there'll be 2 parts to it, in my view, having only talked about this afternoon. The mechanics of these possible amendments. So my view would be we would know the quantum of what that might be, whether it's in June or July is probably a secondary question. We may be able to identify in that time some savings in the current budget, so we may not need extra funds. We may just need to reallocate from another, underspent budget. We'll probably still inform Council in the right process. It may just be informing you informally, if that makes sense, or it might be a budget amendment, depending on the quantum and where we've got to take it from and to. If you prefer to put it through the budget proper, then I guess we engage by July. We are engaging. If we engage by 30 June, we essentially have no funding for it. So I think good governance is probably a budget amendment, a one-off budget amendment in June, if we want to engage by 30 June. I think that, given the prominence of this matter, I think that's probably a safe way to go.
Yeah. All right. So I'm happy with that. So that would be to change 0.5 on the screen to delete April and insert June. Are there any other questions about the alternate motion? Deputy Mayor Miles.
So just quickly, so the Mayor and I have sort of smushed our 2 amendments together, but so you have reviewed them separately but not together, and is there anything that you've seen that you think doesn't work or has been misinterpreted or smooshed incorrectly.
Ms Labicus?
In reviewing both motions this afternoon, I guess the view that I formed was that they were pretty close. So I'm comfortable with what's been put up.
Did you have any other questions, or do you want to speak to the item?
No, I think
now
I'm
as a
good.
Seconder.
I guess, okay, I'll just speak briefly to say I think the report about the trees sort of brought up some bigger issues, and so I think there's a real opportunity for us, the town, to review our project management sort of approach more broadly. I guess for me, it's really important that we have enough time to do it. So we're making sure we've got time to potentially hire the independent consultant, but the correct person who can do the job and brief them properly. So for me, if the town feels that the timeframes are going to work, I think this is a real opportunity to sort of pick up on the issues well beyond just the trees being chopped down and kind of look at all of our processes and the way we do things and do things better.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Miles. So we'll ask, do other elected members have any questions about this, given that you did see two different versions of this and there has been some smushing, to quote that technical term from Deputy Mayor Miles. Try and bring the two together. No, doesn't look like there are any questions. So I will formally ask if there's any dissent to what's being proposed, so I know if we're going to enter debate or not. And no indication that there is any dissent. So on that basis, going to declare the alternate motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks to everyone. Thank you to the town's administration. I know that doing the investigation was not an easy task by any stretch of the imagination for a lot of different reasons. And so council does extend our thanks to Ms Labicus and her team who worked on this to try to get information compiled together that we could review and understand what had occurred. So I think we possibly know more than we ever wanted to know, but we will always have questions that are never going to be answered necessarily. So hopefully this is a roadmap forward for us all. So thank you for that. The next item on the agenda is, I'm hoping against hope when I get through the page, but it's been dealt with by exception resolution, and it has. 13.5 has been dealt with by exception resolution. Item 14 is the Chief Financial Officer reports. 14.1 and 14.2 have all been dealt with by exception resolution. 14.3 is the mid-year budget review. This is an absolute majority item. The recommendation is that Council 1 approves the budget variations requests as detailed in attachment 14.3.1. 2 approves the revised reserve movement as detailed in attachment 14.3.2. And 3 approves the revised statement of financial activity as detailed in attachment 14.3.3. Looking for a mover and seconder, please, for the recommendation. All right, that's been moved by Deputy Mayor Miles and seconded by Councillor Cruiser. Deputy Mayor Miles, did you want to speak to this item? No. Councillor Cruiser, you wanting to speak to this item? No. I'm going to ask, is there any dissent? Not seeing any dissent. On that basis, I'll declare the item is carried unanimously. Item 15 is committee reports. 15.1 and 15.2 have been dealt with by exception resolution. Item 16 is applications for leave of absence. I haven't received any notice of any. Is anybody seeking a leave of absence tonight? No. All right. Item 17, motion of which previous notice has been given. There aren't any. Item 18, questions from elected members without notice. Are there any questions from elected members without notice? No. All right. Item 19, new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting. There are none. Item 20 is public question time, which I'll now open at 10:05 p.m. and invite the only member of the public gallery if you wish to ask any questions. No? Right. I'll close public question time at 10:05 p.m. Item 21 is public statement time, which I'll open at now. It's 10:06 p.m. And again, ask the only member of the public in the gallery if you'd like to make a statement. All right. Thank you. Well, I guess at this late hour, we're probably obliged that you've resisted the temptation. So I'll close public statement time at 10:06 p.m. Item 22 is meeting closed to the public. We have no items for which the meeting is closed to the public. And so at 10:06 p.m, I will declare the meeting is closed. Thank you everyone for your contributions to tonight's meeting, and thank you to those who watched us on live streaming. We are adjourned. Good night.